I'm going to call the meeting to order and just mention that NORCAM will be recording and broadcasting this meeting, and there may be others that are doing the same thing. I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Thank you.
We're going to have to take a second to call our board to order, too, because we've
Okay.
got a quorum.
Okay.
Sure. Good, we're good.
Okay.
Excellent. So welcome everybody who is in the audience and who is maybe watching at home or watching in the future for your attention. Tonight we're here with a meeting of the North Reading Board of Selectmen jointly with the Reading Board of Selectmen with regard to the ongoing discussions between the town of North Reading and the town of Reading concerning our water infrastructure project to connect to the MWRA through the town of Reading. And Mr. Chairman, through you, I'd suggest perhaps the first order of business would be introductions from the members from the boards and the staff from each of the communities, as well as the folks who are here from the MWRA, whose attention and attendance we appreciate, and really anyone else in the audience, and we'll go through the agenda at that point.
Okay, I'll start with our board. Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Prisco.
Mr. Prisco. Other members of our board are expected this evening and are not present.
Mr. Halsey.
Yeah, I'm John Halsey, and I'm the chairman of the board in Reading, and Dan Ensminger and Barry Berman. Also, Bob LeLacheur, our town manager
And Senator Bruce Tag.
and senator.
Senator, thank you.
Senator Tag, you're early.
Thanks, Steve.
Actually, you're right on time.
I knew
Did I-
Fred
I
Lasky
know
was
all
coming.
We have
Mr.
Mr. Lasky.
Mr. Lasky, you want to introduce who's with you, Fred? Use the microphone a little bit there, just so that people at home could.
Sure. I'm Fred Lasky, I'm the Executive Director of the MWRA. To my left is Pam Heidel, who is, wears many hats, but is our expert on system expansion. Joseph Cavallaro is the Executive Director of the MWRA Advisory Board, which represents the interests of the 61 MWRA communities.
And Bob, I think you have some members of your organization in the audience.
We do. Why don't you folks introduce yourselves to the mic? Jane, you can start.
Ryan Percival, Town Engineer.
Here is all water and sewer for the town of Reading.
And we have from town, Mark Clark, who's in charge of our water department, and
Consultants,
what's his name?
yeah, why don't you introduce yourself as consultants for the town?
Rob Williamson, I'm the project manager from right here, is assisting the town with the water project.
Paul Brickman, assisting as well, working with the town on various aspects.
We have everybody,
So,
and all set.
So the purpose of the meeting tonight was to have both boards of selectmen together and to relay to the community here in North Reading and correspondingly community in the town of Reading at a future Board of Selectmen meeting in the town of Reading, the discussions that have been ongoing between the two towns and the two subcommittees of the two boards. So for the past few months, a subcommittee of the North Reading Board of Selectmen has been meeting regularly with a subcommittee of the Reading Board of Selectmen and staff from both communities as well to discuss both the technical ends of the project, the financial ends of the project that are at stake, and perhaps most significantly, discussions relative to an intermunicipal agreement between the two communities, which is a key component of the success of this project, because North Reading does not directly abut the MWRA service area and would need to obtain water through the town of Reading. Again, as will be relayed later on in the water information session that we have scheduled to take place, we have a detailed and an aggressive design and construction plan aimed at getting us actively connected no later than July 1st of 2019. And again, there's been more than a year worth of technical analysis that's been ongoing to evaluate that, and we believe that that is feasible at this point in time. My thought was to go through what we have as a presentation here this evening, just so that the folks who are at the table are aware of the presentation we're making to the public here. And again, the second component of the meeting at 7 o'clock is an information session intended to generate questions and to answer questions for the community ahead of the North Reading town meeting on Monday, June 6th. at which we'll be requesting funding for just over $1 million worth of design work, the bulk of design work associated with this project. So first I would ask, is there anybody who would like to make any comments, either members of the board, members of the Reading Board, Mr. LaLasher, or otherwise?
I would just like to make a comment that I'm working with the town of Reading, town administrator and the subcommittee. It's really been a pleasure, everybody working together to make this thing happen. And it's much, much appreciated.
Ditto.
Yep.
I want to go on record as making that a point.
Thank you. I would
Mr.
echo.
Lasky should take that back to the MWRA. We're going to make this happen from both sides. Mr. Leary, Mr. Prisco, anything you want to say?
It has been a lot of work behind the scenes that I don't think the public has seen. But I just want to reassure the public and the folks that are in the room this evening, even though we don't get together a lot like this, I think this meeting's been a long time coming, and I think it's very important. I think tonight, before the official work done, I would like us to take a few minutes at some point, I'm not sure when Mr. Misteri have it planned in, that we sort of ask ourselves some questions that we think the public's going to ask us this evening, to make sure we're all on the same page. And I have made a list, there are about 7 or 8. Some of them discuss about funding, some of them discuss about infrastructure, some of them discuss about, thank you, long-term plans for the MWRA. So if we could just get a little bit on the same page, that's my biggest worry this evening, is to make sure that when we're all in the room this evening, that's one of the reasons, the rationale they get together early is just to make sure we're all on the same page, because I know there's been a tremendous amount of work going on in separate areas. And so if, I'm not sure at what point you had planned for that. I know we only have about a half hour, but I certainly hope that we can do that.
Why don't we go through the presentation so everyone here, in case they have to leave and can't stay for the 7 o'clock session, get an opportunity to see the presentation, and then we have time before the 7 o'clock, Michael?
Okay, so do you want us to ask questions as you go through it, or just do it at the end?
I think it's set up to ask questions at the end.
But I think for our kind of planning purposes, we should, slide by slide, if there's any questions that come up, we should address them at that time.
Okay,
Sure.
fine.
Okay.
And I would just like to comment again and reiterate appreciation to the town of Reading, the MWRA, for working with us and working closely with us, and remind State Senator that if there's any money available, we certainly appreciate it. And I know,
That took a lot longer than I thought.
I know.
What you asked
But, and I know, between yourself and Representative Jones, you work very hard on our behalf, and it's greatly appreciated, and I know that you're going to work tirelessly on our behalf in order to get this done.
Happy to help.
Much appreciated. John?
Yeah, I just, in the interest of time, I don't know, we don't have a lot, but I'd like to echo all of your comments. It's been a pleasure. Dan and I have been working as a subcommittee now for, with Mike and Bob for best part of a year. I think maybe even longer. And we've been reporting back to Barry and the other selectmen. And so we're excited about the idea of partnering at this level and any other levels that present themselves to our next door neighbor. So, thanks.
You ready, Mike?
I am, yes. And just a note, it may be more relevant when we get to the information session, but the microphones that are in front of you, there is a white button right in the middle of them. If you press it and hold it, the red light should turn on and it will engage and speak through the system. Unfortunately, it's not wired directly into NORCAM, which is a cable broadcast, so that's why the roving microphone is out there now. But with that, I'll go through the presentation. I'm going to go pretty quickly through the slides that relate to sewer, because this is part of the permit application that we have, the DEIR permit that's pending before a variety of state agencies right now in a draft form. It's not really the bulk of what's being deliberated, nor is any funding being requested at the June town meeting, but we do have slides in it because it does relate. So if there's no objection, I'm actually going to kind of go really quickly through those and focus on the water, because that's where the bulk of the discussion I expect will be this evening. If there's no disagreement, I'll just proceed. So again, we have an introductory slide here showing the two areas that we're looking at. We have a brief description of the nature of wastewater disposal here in North Reading, with the town being entirely on on-site disposal system, with the exception of a few areas in the south or on the west side of town, as well as the town's middle and high school, which are on a wastewater treatment facility here in the center of town, just outside this building. Again, some of the goals that we're talking about with regard to wastewater, and we'll go through that, and be Wright Pierce that'll be making that portion of the presentation. Well, we do have some data that we'll be showing the community relative to our in-town systems and some of the trouble areas that we identify that may be out there with regard to in-town septic disposal. Some of the options that we've looked at, we've looked at the MWRA and we've looked at Greater Lowell's Sewer District. It does appear at this point that there are certainly some challenges associated with either of those options, whether it be financially or the infrastructure to connect. So the plan that we've kind of come to and that's pending before the state agencies in the draft environmental impact report is a blended approach of in-town and out-of-town options with potential Greater Lowell Sewer District connection to Martins Pond Main Street, for Martins Pond Main Street, and potentially for Concord Street. We're also looking at a potential connection for Concord Street to the MWRA on a much smaller scale, as what I guess I would describe as a plan that's probably more likely to progress than the larger sewer connection project that's outlined here. So with that, we'll get into the water supply. If there are any questions on the sewer end of it. So a little background, talking about the description here. And it may be more effective, Rob, if you don't mind going through the draft on the technical end, because that's how we'll do it in the information session. And then I'll take over at the financial end. So I'll introduce again Rob Williamson from Wright Pierce, so we'll go through the technical end of it.
So what this is intended to show is give an overview of the community, the current water supply sources that the town has available to them, showing that they have their own in-house sources with a capacity of about just under 1 million gallons a day, and they get the bulk of their water from the neighboring town of North Andover. Below that, it's showing what their peak demands are now and then projections for the future. And what that shows is there's a slight deficit in both cases. But that doesn't tell the whole picture. Same table, but this is showing, so the first one showing what the theoretical supply capacity is. This is showing what the actual supply capacity is today. The biggest difference being the town sources are pumping, and they're only capable of pumping something that's significantly less than what they're permitted for. That's because these supplies are groundwater wells. They're tired, 30, 40 years old. They're approaching the end of their useful life, and there's just really no other opportunities within the community, either groundwater or surface water, to increase that supply capacity, and thus is the crux of the problem before the community. And when you consider that, you can see that the supply deficits, both currently and in the future, begin to increase fairly substantially. So knowing that, we began our study with a number of goals in mind. Number one, first and foremost, was to identify a long-term sustainable supply that would keep the community going well out into the future. And the example I always give, and this is not because MWRA is sitting here today, but think of the MWRA. That was a system that was started back in the 1800s. They had the foresight way back then to build a system that they didn't know where it was going to be, but they knew they needed a lot of water, and they wanted water to keep them going for centuries to come. That's kind of the position that North Reading's in this today. So that was part of the goal, was to find something that would sustain them for a long, long time. If possible, to simplify the water system. As we mentioned, there's 5 or 6 wells that are currently operated in the community, but there's 2 treatment plants and 1 pumping station. So it's a fairly complex system to operate. With that, if there was an opportunity at all to contain the capital and operating costs of that system, they're extensive. That the treatment equipment itself is also getting to the point where it needs to be upgraded. So if there was opportunities to improve or reduce costs there, that's what we'd be looking at. I mentioned before that we want to look for a solution that would serve not only the existing customer base, but the future customer base. That is, not everyone in the community is connected to the water system right now, and the town is interested in potentially economic growth as well. So this supply has to serve not only the needs of the community today, but far into the future. And finally, another primary goal was to reduce the stress on the Ipswich River Basin. When I had shown that the first graph about what the water supply availability is in the community now, that cannot be increased. It couldn't happen because of the stress that's on the Ipswich River Basin. So the goal would be to relieve any stress that through the town's wells that are placing on the basin to help with that situation. So we considered a number of alternatives. Number one, first and foremost, was looking to increase withdrawals from Andover, since that seems to make the most sense, since that's where they're getting the largest portion of the supply right now. Unfortunately, in discussions with them, they simply do not have the excess capacity to give. They are limited in what they can give, both in supply and somewhat in infrastructure. So it's not a viable option. It's not something where they could increase any supply to meet the future needs of the community. And on the right there's conservation. Conservation obviously was considered in all of the alternatives. It's something that everyone these days has to be looking forward to, looking towards as they operate a system. But again, even with the best conservation policies in place, you're still not going to be able to make up that deficit. So I mentioned we took a look at also, is there a way to optimize or expand the existing in-town supplies? And the short and skinny answer is no, not really. There is no, or not really, there absolutely is no way to expand it. The supplies are unreliable right now. They're declining in both capacity and in water quality. And because of the Ipswich River Basin and the stresses on it, the town would just simply not be able to get a permit to increase any withdrawals anymore from the basin whatsoever. There's been studies done over many, many years. There are no viable large capacity, either surface or groundwater supplies remaining in the community. Sure, there's small outliers. People probably will be able to see small ponds here or there, but they just don't meet the current and future supply needs of the community. And I mentioned before that the existing facilities, they are right at the end of their life where they need a significant overhaul and upgrade. As a matter of fact, one of the treatment plants has lost 30 to 40% of its treatment capacity. It's just getting tired. So we looked at what other alternatives are out there. How could they develop alternative supplies elsewhere? So we took a look at what all the neighbors to each side of North Reading has for availability from the Wilmingtons and everybody in the north and the south. Unfortunately, there's no communities that have that excess capacity that would be needed to operate the system both now and into the future. The only one, and that is actually through a neighboring community, is the MWRA. They not only have the capacity to give, they have excess capacity. Both Wilmington, I should mention, Wilmington is connected to MWRA, and they do obtain some of their supply from them, but the infrastructure to get the water from the MWRA pipe network through Wilmington into North Reading would be expensive, an expensive endeavor to undertake. They just don't, their distribution system just is not built to handle large capacity flows. Reading, on the other hand, has a very strong system. They've been a customer of MWRA for quite some time now, and they've built their system around those flows. We did an extensive hydraulic analysis and found that with some reasonable improvements to their system, they can even take quite a bit more capacity. In fact, the capacity that's needed for North Reading. So from all that, the recommended plan was to, or is to, obtain water from MWRA, wheeling it or routing it through the neighboring community of Reading's water system. There was a technical group that was formed over a year ago that consisted of folks from Reading, North Reading, and the MWRA. We looked at the hydraulics of the system, and surprisingly, from the consulting side, I was surprised how strong their system was and how few improvements were actually needed to make this happen, to strengthen their system, to be able to push the water needed by North Reading from the south to the north. And that's just a simple map. I know it's small. In red is basically showing the pipes that were identified to be upgraded to make all this work. We're not going to go into the detail of what they're about. But the other benefits of connecting to MWRA through Reading is that MWRA is currently in the process of building a second pipeline that will connect to Reading, which will essentially give full redundancy to the communities that are on their system in the north. And what I mean by that is they've designed their system so that should either one of those main transmissions fail, they still have capacity through a second one. That offers a lot, that's very attractive. That should be very attractive to any community. And obviously connecting to MWRA and relieving the burden of your current supplies will also relieve stress on the Ipswich River. So the recommended plan is to pump from Reading. There's about as I mentioned, about 2.5 miles of pipe upgrades that we have identified that are needed. There will be a booster pump station needed at the interface between Reading and North Reading. That site has yet to be identified, but we know one is needed, and that's because the hydraulics of pumping water from one community to the other, you need to boost pressure to get into North Reading. Part of that recommendation, we would also recommend that you maintain the interconnections with the community of Andover as a backup emergency connection. This would also serve as a double benefit, as it would serve as redundancy to the town of Reading as well, if there was ever a situation where that was needed. And then finally, once all the infrastructure is in place and you're actually physically connected to MWRA through Reading, the town could abandon their existing supplies and the infrastructure that goes along with that. Just a quick little picture. This showing the pipe network, MWRA's pipe network from the south as it leads up to Reading. On the left-hand side, the blue pipe, that's their existing main that connects to Reading, and all the colored pipes on the right-hand side are mains that are currently in design or under construction right now. That means increased reliability to both communities. And our analysis, as we looked at what improvements would be needed and what it would take to actually make this happen, this was a stipulation that Reading asked for, that they were willing to work with North Reading to make this connection happen, but they wanted to see this in place before that was done. Understandable. So kind of in conclusion, the schedule, what we're targeting right now is we're in the permitting phase. Michael had mentioned we are just receiving comments on the DER, the Draft Environmental Impact Report, which is a permit that allows everybody who has any interest in water supply whatsoever related to this project have comment. We're getting comments this week, next week? Friday. And we'll continue the permitting through that, where we have to respond to that to get the final approval. We're hoping to begin design on the infrastructure, pump station, piping upgrades and things of that nature. That's imminent, within weeks here. And then the plan would be to start constructing all these projects to make this happen. Bidding projects next summer, late spring, early summer, begin construction with the ultimate goal of being ready to connect to MWRA in July 1, 2019. And it's shown over there on the left, the last thing that would happen would be to decommission the existing supplies in North Reading. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Maybe
Financials, or are there any other technical?
Before we go into the financial aspect of it, any questions for Rob? or anyone? Yeah,
Yeah, about your projected capacity was just, I think, 0.02 million gallons a day more than your current. Is that been appropriately sized for your planned industrial development, commercial expansion? I was surprised that only went from 2.56 to 2.58.
That is sized based on the best information we have where development is going. I don't think they know quite yet where the actual economic development will take them. It's an excellent question, but without concrete information, it's hard to add numbers to that, hard to justify adding numbers to that.
Maybe a better question, what would be the peak amount of water, million gallons a day, that this proposed system would provide to North Reading?
2.58.
So that's it there?
Yep.
Okay.
anyone else? Yes?
Yeah, the Andover source that we're currently using to supplement current demand, what is Andover's projected to increase demand, and what is their need for water in the future? And how is that going to impact us in terms of cost of water we buy from them?
We have a 5-year agreement. We're already into 2 years of it, where the current rate, if we go back to last year's rate, it was $3.10 per 100 cubic feet. And the agreement, as it states, if Andover went to a tiered system like North Reading, we would pay an increase of 5% per year. So this fiscal 2017, which begins on July 1st, we'll be paying 5% over the $3.10 per 100 cubic feet.
Is their current, do they have enough capacity to meet their demand without cutting into that supply source? In other words, are they going to start diverting more water from our needs to support their own increased demand?
In the period of the contract, we don't believe there'll be any issue at all.
No, I'm not talking about now, I'm talking about in the future, because we're trying to evaluate alternatives in terms of connecting to the MWRA versus continuing the agreement with North Andover, and any other options such as drilling new belt fields or resurrecting the 1974 joint use reservoir with Linfield Center Water District that was voted down in about 1974 or 75 at the $1974 cost of $6 million. Construction cost.
I don't want to be rude. I want to cut you off. I think you were here for the 7 o'clock meeting?
Yes.
Okay. This is a 6 o'clock pre-meeting with the Reading Board of Selectmen and the MWRA. And this presentation will be repeated at 7 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
But just-
We'll let you ask your questions then.
But Bob, just the short of it is, Reading is, Andover is limited as to what they can deliver to us by legislation, intermunicipal agreement, first of all. Secondly, we've been informed by them over a year ago that they would not be able to increase any additional capacity to us to meet our future demands and needs. So they supply about 2/3 of our water currently. It's going to stay the same through the terms of the 5-year contract, and at that point, I think we're going to be all set with the MWRA. All right.
Just to quickly comment on the 256, 258 differential. As Rob said earlier, there's a conservation component to this. So looking at that 256, the actual use is going to have to come down in order to meet current conservation standards. So there is a growth component
Thank you.
in the 258 number.
If there are no more questions on that aspect of it, Michael, will you continue with the financial aspects of it?
Certainly.
Just a quick question on before we go into the financials. To MWRA, are there any other infrastructure projects that are going on that currently have to be completed before North Reading can tie in? And is there any updates that did we miss anything in our presentation tonight that we should mention associated with that?
We just brought online the new Spot Pond tank over behind the hospital in Stoneham with the redundant pump station. That's a major step forward. The first of the projects through Reading is underway. We're on Hopkins Street as we speak. That's going well. We are in the design for the other two pieces of it in the southern portion, heading south down into Stoneham to make that loop. We're in discussions with the town about moving forward with that and with Stoneham. So there's no other major components that I can think of.
Right, and the contract with the second meter connection, which was where you did all the hydraulic analysis, that will be complete by 2017.
That's great.
I just think, Rob, that may be some good information for you to keep in mind, or maybe turn to MWRA if that question comes up through the night, because I have a feeling that one may come up. Thank you.
You all set, Michael?
Yep, that was good.
If I could just
Michael?
ask a question,
Oh.
Fred, what about our water storage? Where's that stand in this part of town?
That's been kind of overshadowed with the pipeline projects and frankly, these discussions
Yeah.
with North Reading to determine where the best location for the tank is. It's still something in our planning that we would like to do, and I think once we get this all kind of locked in, we'd come back and revisit. We had several locations in Reading. I know we also had looked in North Reading, perhaps up this way. So I think we'd have to revisit that whole thing once this is, or if this is all locked in.
Okay.
All set? Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll go through the financial aspect of this, of the proposed project, including the capital costs, projected rate impacts, and/or projected potential property tax rate impacts, opportunities for aid and assistance, and economic development impacts. So just a chart here that shows the existing infrastructure versus the proposed switch to the MWRA. And just in the subtitle there, you see we have an issue with capacity, as was identified previously, and that there seems to be virtually unlimited capacity with regard to the MWRA's ability to provide water. It's just a matter of the system being sized to account for it, and as was referenced earlier, we believe we've achieved that with all the information we can project forward to our year 2033 needs. Is that correct? So, just based on the existing infrastructure, one of the first things that we need to note for everyone to understand is that with our existing supply system here in North Reading, we are projecting a need of approximately $9.6 million over the next 5+ years. And that's everything from our wells to water treatment. It does not account for any of the needs relative to our water distribution system, but merely only our wells. And again, by doing that, we still are in a situation where we're not able to address our forecasted needs. With regard to the MWRA, as you can see, the capital investment is slightly more at $9.945 million. And then there is also a corresponding buy-in to the MWRA, and that would be for, again, all of our water supply at $7.68 million. And that is essentially financed by the MWRA and paid back to the MWRA by virtue of an annual assessment each year. Again, you see the notes there with regard to supporting growth and increased capacity versus the unlimited capacity and the future condition needs. With regard to the existing arrangement, we do have a known with regard to the rates in that we have a short-term IMA with Andover with a built-in 5% escalator, as we've seen from recent negotiations with the town of Andover. That can be certainly variable from one IMA to the next, versus we would not have that dependence with regard to the proposed MWRA agreement. We would certainly be subject to their annual rate assessment, but the structure of that rate assessment wouldn't be as volatile as it has been with regard to the IMA. With regard to the capacity issue, again, the Ipswich River Basin being our capacity, being our source, we are subject to a regulatory component versus the regulatory obligation, with the exception of the usage on our end, would largely be on the part of the MWRA with regard to their role as a water supplier. And then finally, we have manpower for operations and maintenance of our water, not only our water distribution system, but our water supply system as well. and we are forecasting a reduction of up to approximately $300,000 by virtue of reduced labor and operating expenses. Again, that reduction does get offset by the cost at the top right-hand side there with the buy-in and the capital, but we are forecasting a reduction. So we have a chart here that's intended to outline for folks what the long-term projection is. And Mark, you certainly correct me at any point, but the three lines there, if you start with the red line, Mark, if I'm not mistaken, that's the MWRA?
Yeah, do you want me to just?
Yeah, if you want to go through that would be great.
Sorry, this is something we literally were putting together this afternoon, and we haven't had a whole lot of chance to vet. But basically, the blue line would be our operating budget costs over and the bottom is fiscal year. So from FY20 out to FY41, the blue line represents kind of the as-is or existing costs, purchasing water from Andover and operating our own wells. The orange line is basically the cost it would cost us to replace that with buying in at 100% MWRA over the same period of years. That's actually a budget that we have presented going back. It shows MWRA rates increasing at about 4.25% per year, which is a number we had been using. The green line in between the two basically represents the same thing. It just, Pam Heidel was kind enough to present me some more up-to-date forecasts on MWRA, which kind of kicks that line down a little bit. The question being, why would North Reading go this way? Obviously, the blue line is cheaper than either of the other options going forward. There is a point where the lines cross, and the MWRA actually, based on operating budget, does become cheaper than staying on our own system. Again, it's out a few years. It's out in about FY37. But that does happen. That's while we're still paying our buy-in costs. That doesn't go away till a few years after that. So at some point down the road, and again, as I believe Rob mentioned, we're looking for a long-term solution to our water needs. If we look over the first couple of years, it is more expensive to go to MWRA. So that's what you're seeing on this chart.
So at a workshop on Monday evening, the Board of Selectmen evaluated a potential option of placing the capital cost, not the buy-in, but the capital cost, which we was using an approximate number of $10 million with an actual projected number of slightly less than that, on the tax rate. And through our actuarial analysis, we end up at a forecasted impact on the North Reading tax rate of approximately 22 cents, which if projected onto the average single-family home at the fiscal year 2016 valuation of $502,195.21 would result in an annual impact on the average single-family home tax bill at $109.07. So that's one alternative that's been looked at, and we've been advised by our financial advisor and by town council that there is an avenue by which we would essentially take this water debt and could potentially transfer it to the tax rate as a means of raising the revenue associated with the cost of the project. One thing to note, the reason that we brought this up is because up until now we've been evaluating the costs at essentially 100% of the cost being borne by our water enterprise. The value or the advantage to this that the Board of Selectmen had wanted us to pursue and wants to make known to the community is that this would become essentially part of the tax rate, potentially be a deductible expense for homeowners versus enterprise payments, which would not.
Because you're going to get the 7.
So we'll go just to the last slide, and then we'll wrap up. This is a summary of what I just identified there earlier in a graph form. And we looked at some calculations with regard to the implications of the rate if you were to do it essentially per account or per the water rate. And I won't delay because I know time is running out, but we've put a simplified rate graph here. For the members of the Selectmen and for those who were at the workshop on Monday evening, we've simplified it by essentially removing the option that showed for assessing a per account cost based on meter size. So the two options you see here now, option 1 is essentially doing it per account, and option 2 is essentially putting it into the water rate. And because of the timing, I'm going to ask Mark to go through it in detail during the public workshop portion of the discussion. And again, we've been working with the town of Reading. We've been briefing our legislative delegation as to the needs, and we're aware of a number of options that we'll describe further in the public presentation. The economic development impacts, again, the ability to have the sustainable water infrastructure is critical for our long-term health, both environmentally and from an economic development standpoint.
Any questions for Michael or anyone here on the board? Yes.
At the risk of taking up all the air here, I would punch up the water quality thing quite a bit more than you've done. And maybe some of the earlier slides, you're going to have less wear, in addition to less wear and tear on the insides of the bodies, less wear and tear on appliances and all that. Well water can be hard even after you put it through treatment. We noticed the big difference in Reading.
And it's something that
Well taken.
something we've been advised of is that when the analysis is done as to water quality, the MWRA water served in Boston comes out number 1, if I'm not mistaken, and then the MWRA water in general is right behind it. I think I've heard something like that.
National taste test by
Nas-
13,000 water experts.
New York's good, too.
They entered our water, we entered our water, they came in first, we came in second. They said it's because they put love in it. I think they put Stolies in it.
Okay?
So what I suggest is perhaps a brief recess. And,
Yes.
The board will.
Turn the lights back on.
Yeah, just quick, all these are constant dollars, 2016 dollars.
We've taken the debt service based on 2016 dollars, that's correct.
Okay, so it doesn't allow for future inflation.
The inflation that we've included in the long-term projection on that bar graph that you saw included projected increases in all of those costs. So when you saw those lines all kind of converging at a very similar spot in 2040, 2041,
Yeah.
all of those were escalated.
Okay, so if you would plot that chart on constant dollars, it would slow down.
Yeah, less steep.
Okay, thank you.
Again, there'll be more time for questions during the workshop.
Gene, will you put the lights on, please? Okay, we're going to take a brief recess. Let those that are attending the 7 o'clock board meeting have a chance to filter in. Again, I'll just mention for those that have come in for the 7 o'clock meeting that the NORCAM is recording this meeting. If you have questions after the presentation, someone will get you one of these type mics. The mics on the tables will not work with respect to getting the audio out to the television broadcast. So with that, I'd like everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everybody here that's come, along with our invited guests from the town of Reading and MWRA, and Senator Carr is here in the audience. And with that, I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Gilberto to get the presentation started. We'd like to run through the presentation and then go into an answer question after the presentation.
So, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I see that a number of residents have come, and we appreciate your attendance this evening at tonight's water workshop. The Board of Selectmen here in North Reading has been meeting with the Reading Board of Selectmen in a joint meeting for the past 45 minutes or so. So there's been kind of an ongoing discussion that's taken place. But I think, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, we could just do a round of introductions for our residents who are here, just so they know who's seated before them.
Okay.
And who's the folks that are here from the MWRA as well.
Why don't we start with you and
Certainly.
just everybody introduce themselves.
Okay, Michael Gilberto, Town Administrator.
Jeff Ewell, Selectman.
Bob Messeri, Selectman.
Steve O'Leary, Selectman.
John Halsey, Selectman Reading.
Dan Ensminger, Selectman Reading.
Barry Berman, Selectman from Reading.
Bob Lasher, Town Manager in Reading, and I'd also like to include some of our staff, Jeff Zager, DPW Director, Peter Isbell is our Water Sewer Supervisor, Ryan is our new Town Engineer, first week on the job, and Jane Kinsella, Assistant DPW Director.
Michael,
Senator Bruce Tarr.
Yep. Michael, you want to continue it?
Yes, Board of Selectmen member, North Reading.
Fred Lasky, Executive Director, MWRA.
Pam Idell, Policy and Planning Manager, MWRA.
And Joe Favolo, Executive Director, MWRA Advisory Board.
Mark?
Mark Clark, North Reading Water.
Bob? Or Rob?
Yep, Rob Williamson, Project Manager from Wright Pierce.
Paul Rickman, technical support on the project.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Gene?
Gene Torek, our IT Director. Thank you, Gene, for your help tonight. So just before we go into the presentation which we have this evening, and then there'll be plenty of opportunity for question and answer as well, I would just note some of the residents may be asking why the large crowd at the front of the room. And I guess we want more than anything for our residents to know that there's been an ongoing cooperative relationship between the town of North Reading and the MWRA, and as indicated by their presence here. But know that their presence this evening is an indicator of the support they provided throughout this project. We have about 25 slides worth of presentation this evening that we'll go through. Some of you may have been at the first workshop back in March. We took the feedback that was provided at that workshop and we've adjusted the presentation to answer more of the questions that came up. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rob Williamson, who will start with the technical aspect of the presentation. And after that's been concluded, we'll go through the financial aspect of the presentation. And then I guess, Mr. Chairman, through you, we'd ask for questions to be held to the end.
Questions to the chair, I'll acknowledge so that we don't get crosstalk. Rob? Gene?
Well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Again, just by point of introduction, my name is Rob Williamson. I'm a project manager with the consulting firm of Wright Pierce. We've been blessed to be responsible for helping the town of Reading, North Reading, over the past couple of years on this project. We've been integral in discussions with Reading and MWRA. And so tonight we're just going to give you a little bit of background about what we have been doing over the last couple of years, some conclusions, some findings, and things of that nature. The first thing we're going to talk about, because just so you understand, this project was bundled as a package, with that being a sewer component and the water component. And the gentleman, Paul Frank, was going to talk to you a little bit about why that was. But so the first one we want to talk about very briefly is the sewer component, and just how that kind of relates with this whole project. And then I'll take it over and go into detail on the water project.
Thank you, Rob. So, just a brief outline. I'm going to talk a little bit about wastewater, and then more of the discussion tonight will be on the water side. The reason that we took these on all at once is when you're thinking about water and the way that you use it, also wastewater comes into mind because that's an influence on, the water supply in the town, and some of the challenges with the Ipswich River is wastewater and how that's managed in town. Some of the influences why the Ipswich is polluted is due to wastewater and septic systems. There are reports out there. The EPA and DEP wrote a report that said one of the main pollution components in the Ipswich River is from failing septic systems. So as part of this opportunity, we wanted to look at it comprehensively to see what kind of solutions there might be. So from a wastewater standpoint, the town currently is largely serviced by septic systems, those private on-site systems. There's a few treatment plants, very small treatment plants, which discharge to the ground. And there is actually one connection. There's an industry in the southwest corner of town that is connected to MWRA. They went through their own permitting process years ago to get connected. And so the town wanted us to look at what were the challenges with wastewater as we're going through this process, looking at water and wastewater at the same time, because there's some synergy in them. So from the wastewater standpoint, we set some goals. We said, what do we need to be looking for? What do we want to improve through this process? So some of the things I've already talked about, water quality, try to find maybe more sustainable solutions, because there are people that are challenged with very small sites. It's hard to build a septic system on a small site or with poor soils. Also make sure that you have some potential for economic development. That was another potential a piece that we were looking at. So we did a lot of analysis. This is our busiest map that we created, and there's a lot going on there. I'm not even going to get into all the different colors but basically this particular map, we were trying to determine whether or not we had a way of treating and disposing of wastewater within North Reading. And as we went through this process, we looked at, what was the availability of the land, how was it being used, is it near a water supply, and there's so many factors that go into it. It just shows a lot of the analysis that went into it. In terms of alternatives, we did find that there was some need to provide a municipal system. Now, there's an affordability component to that, of course, but looking at this without the dollars in mind, there's a piece of this that makes sense to sewer that would improve the water quality in the Switch River. And so in terms of our alternatives, we looked at in-basin and there really wasn't enough room or any place to put the wastewater once it's treated. So we looked at outside, and there were really two potential scenarios. We could look at MWRA to provide sewer service. There are challenges with that and significant costs. And we also looked at Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, which serves Andover and a few communities that way. We talked to them, and they do have capacity to provide for sewage treatment should the town decide to go that route. So our recommended plan when we pulled this all together was a mix of all options. It wasn't a need to sewer the whole community, but there are portions of the community that could be sewered and sewered to GLSD. Martins Pond, Main Street, and Concord Street were the three primary areas. I know that the town has been looking at some even smaller pieces of that and looking at potential to provide some options along those lines. The high school is serviced by a wastewater treatment plant that was built as part of the facility. It is underutilized right now, so there is some opportunity to attach some buildings to that and improve that usage of that facility. And then the rest of the town would remain on their own individual septic systems, replacing them as they need. So I'll ask Rob to talk about water.
Thanks, Paul. I should mention some of the tables and graphs that you see tonight. There's a few hard copies up here, and after the presentation, you're welcome to come up and take a peek at those. So let's talk about the water project and what that had. Oops, sorry. And what that has entailed. So let me paint a picture for you. I think that's the best way to present this. Why is your Board of Selectmen taking a look at connecting or making a connection to the MWRA? That is what you're hearing about. So the picture I want to paint is what the town currently has for supplies and what the available supply capacity is. So what you see on here is the theoretical capacity, the first two lines there, of town sources is just under 1 million gallons per day. The largest component of the town supply comes from the neighboring town of Andover. That is 1.5 million gallons per day. For just under 2.56 million gallons, or 2.5 million gallons a day is what the theoretical capacity of the community is. When you look at the existing peak demands of the system and the projected demands of the system, you can see that there is a slight deficit. It doesn't really tell you the whole picture, however. What the second column is showing you is what the actual capacity of the town's supply system is. The biggest difference being the town's own in-town supplies, the groundwater supplies. The current supplies is a series of 4 or 5 wells. They can only produce about 60% of what they were originally designed and rated for. And that's where you see the significant deficit. So when you apply that drop to the existing peak demands and the projected peak demands of the system, that deficit grows substantially. In terms of percentages of the overall demand, it's fairly substantial. So that was the base for where to start. What do we do about that? And that's what we're going to talk about. So when we went into the project, there was a number of goals that the community asked us to consider as we go about this project. Number one was is there an opportunity to find, identify, develop a long-term sustainable water supply? And I mentioned this earlier. The example I always give to communities that are looking to expand their supplies is think big and think long. The example I want to give is, literally, it's not because they're sitting in the room, because it's one of the best examples in the country, is the MWRA. That system was started back in the early 1800s. It has the capacity to serve the city of Boston and the greater Boston community, I don't even want to guess for how many years out in the future. They had the foresight way back then to know that they were going to need a supply, and they wanted it to last for centuries, and that's exactly what they got. That's where we would put the town of North Reading in the same position right now. We're at a crossroads, you're at a junction. You need water, your existing supplies have served you well. You should be looking big and something that'll serve you far out into the future. So that was the number one goal. Secondary goals was an opportunity to simplify the existing water supply system as it exists now. I mentioned there's 4 or 5 wells that you get your water from. There's also 2 water treatment plants that are operated by staff, and there's 1 booster pump station. All those facilities are complicated. They require a lot of manpower, electricity, chemicals, things of that nature. So that led to the next bullet is there a way to contain those capital and operating costs? Another goal that we were looking at. Fourthly was we wanted to find a supply that serves not only the existing customer base, but the future customer base. That includes both residential growth of the community and growth for commercial economic development. And lastly, any solution that we hope to find would be one that we could say that we're going to reduce the stress up on the Ipswich River Basin. I don't have to tell everybody, you know what the circumstances are around the Ipswich River Basin. It's a very stressed basin. So anything the community can do to relieve that is in their best interest, and that's what they asked us to look at. So what were the alternatives we considered? Well, number one was looking at the town of Andover was could we go to them and obtain greater capacity to meet those needs for the future? The select board met with Andover a year or so back and determined at that time Andover did not have the capacity to either give now or even increase to meet the future needs. So that wasn't going to be a viable alternative. I have on the other side, on the right-hand side here, conservation. Conservation was also considered in terms of could greater conservation efforts be placed on the community to help reduce water use and make up that deficit. Conservation, even when it's employed efficiently, it allows you to gain water, but you don't gain great quantities of water back, maybe perhaps 5 or 10%. So there wasn't enough gains in conservation alone to make up that deficit. However, I need to point out that of all the solutions that are out there, conservation will, and the town's made a commitment, will be part of any solution going forward. So the other alternatives that we were considered. The next one being, could we optimize, expand, do something with your existing supplies to increase that supply capacity that you needed? We took a look at that. Unfortunately, it's just simply not possible. Why? As I mentioned, the groundwater wells are 30, 40, 50 years old. They have a useful life, and they're nearing the end of that life. They're degrading. Their efficiency is very poor, and the efficiency cannot be restored. Not only that, but the water quality is degrading as well. So that was not one of the viable options. Because of the Ipswich River Basin and the constraints that are placed on communities that withdraw from it, it simply would not be possible to get permitted to pull more water out of this basin. So that would take that alternative off the table. Over the years, there's been a number of studies that have looked at other viable surface and groundwater opportunities within the community, and all of them have been exhausted. There's just none available to meet your future supply needs. Now, to step back, I know probably some of you are saying, yes, we have there's a pond here, there's a pond there, and this and that. Yes, there are, and yes, they may supply water, but they cannot provide the quantity of water, even close to the quantity of water that the town needs to meet the future demands. So that those are essentially off the table. And the last being the local supplies and the infrastructure I mentioned earlier. They need significant investment. The treatment plants are 20 years old apiece. They need major overhauls and upgrades to carry them through another 20 years. The wells are of age, all the pumps and those need to be replaced. But again, you simply cannot get any more capacity out of them. The next major alternative we looked at was, can we develop alternative supply sources? And what would that mean? Well, number one, we looked at the neighboring communities, everybody around North Reading. Does any community adjacent to North Reading have excess capacity to give that you can make an interconnection with? We took a look at everybody around. Unfortunately, there was not. The only viable alternative that came to the forefront was MWRA, and that would actually be through the neighboring community of Reading. Wilmington is connected to the MWRA system, but their water distribution infrastructure is not designed to pass the quantities of water that are needed to transfer from the MWRA pipe system network through their system into North Reading. It would take major investment in upgrading their system to be able to do that. Reading, on the other hand, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we found had a very strong pipe network. They have demands that are very similar to that of North Reading, and they have been building and upgrading their system over time, and we found it has a very strong pipe network. Another advantage of the Reading alternative is that it also provides the community for redundancy. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but what I mean is MWRA literally provides redundancy to Reading, which would also fall in the lap of North Reading. So ultimately, the recommended plan was developed to service North Reading from MWRA. And what we did a year or so ago is we formed a technical committee that consisted of ourselves, our consultants, representatives from the town of Reading, North Reading, and MWRA, where we essentially, in simple terms, is we scrutinized Reading's water system to see what improvements would be needed and necessary to be able to convey the amount of water that would need to be passed through their system into North Reading. And what this map shows you, there's another map up here, there's not a lot of detail that you can see. In red there are really the limited amount of pipelines that need to be upgraded to make this work. From an engineering technical perspective, we were quite surprised to see the limited amount of upgrades that would be needed to make this happen. It's really consistent of some small upgrades to pipelines. We also, Reading has at their advantage a very large pipeline that they usually use from their supplies that can be activated. So in the overall scheme, there's not a lot of upgrades that are needed here. The redundancy reliability factor is huge. Right now, what I mean by that is currently Reading is fed from MWRA in the southern portion of the community by a single pipeline from the MWRA system. MWRA is currently under design and construction of a second pipe that will come from their primary system to feed Reading again from the south. There will be two primary pipe networks from MWRA that feed Reading. And what that does for not only Reading, but all the other communities to the north that are served off of that is it's a redundancy factor, safety factor. If either one of those mains should go down for any reason, they still have full capacity in the other. That's a good thing. You need redundancy in everything you do. And again, this plan by going off of, by taking water from MWRA and through Reading, you're going to reduce the stress again on the Ipswich River Basin because you're going to be able to give up the supplies that you have in town. So again, the recommended plan includes about 2.5 miles of piping upgrades in Reading. It's going to require a booster pump station that would be located at the juncture between Reading and North Reading to convey water from Reading into the North Reading system. That's a hydraulic problem. The pressure essentially that's in their system needs to be boosted to put it up into your system. We would recommend that you actually maintain connections to Andover as an emergency backup. And that serves a double benefit to Reading because it would also serve as Reading's backup in the event of emergency. And that's above and beyond the redundancy that you would already get from MWRA connection. And then finally, once all the infrastructure was in place, the community North Reading could abandon their existing supply facilities. This real quickly, again, there's a hard copy up here if you want to see it. This is a picture of the piping network from MWRA feeding Reading, essentially from the south. On the left-hand side in blue is the existing pipe network. On the right-hand side are the proposed piping network that are under design or going in place right now. So what you see there is you have 2 feeds to Reading, which in essence gives 2 feeds to North Reading, and that's where the redundancy and reliability come into play. Schedule-wise, real briefly, we're in what's called the permitting phase, where I had mentioned earlier we had to submit what's called a DEI, environmental impact report, draft environmental impact report. That was submitted where we expect to receive comments on that at the end of this week, and from there we will respond to those comments with a final environmental impact report. And from that final, hopefully the town will be granted an application or the approval to move forward with the project. Design of the infrastructure improvements that I mentioned, to get brief, we hope to begin imminently, actually within the next week or so, to start on some aspects of the project. There are some very long lead items in some of the design activities that have to occur. But then all the design activities would lead to the construction phase where late next spring, early summer, we will start to bid out these projects for construction. Construction is projected to occur over a 1.5 to 2 year period with the final connection target date of July 1, 2019. That's the goal that the select board had set forth in this planning phase. And from there, once the system is connected to MWRA, it's tested, everyone's comfortable, then the decommissioning of the existing supplies will take place. So briefly, in a nutshell, that's kind of the project, how it's evolved, what went into looking at making the decisions that we're recommending. From there, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Gilberto. Talk a little bit about the finances and the rest.
What I would suggest perhaps is if there are questions that relate to the technical aspect of what's been proposed, perhaps this would be a good time to ask them. So certainly we would open it up to the audience before we go into the financial side of this project.
So at this point, we'll talk about, we'll take questions on the why and how.
It's not coming through the...
The mic's not on.
The mic's on.
That's okay. So, and that microphone is only doing NORCAM. The black microphones with the red lights are doing this room. So for those of you who have a microphone in front of you, if you would like to offer a question, there's actually a white button right in front that you can press and hold, and it will turn on and amplify.
I think what he's saying is none of your mics are working.
That's correct. These microphones are all tied to NORCAM, which is recording and broadcasting this evening's meeting. We'll try to center the discussion through this microphone so that everybody can hear. So if there are questions relative to the technical side of the proposal, now would be a time that you could ask them. If there are no questions, then we'll continue through the other aspects of the presentation, which is the financial and the economic development.
Well, I have a question. Is this coming through now?
There you go, Jim.
Yes, okay. My question is, have you considered reverse osmosis as a process where we could take water from the many parking lots and things of that nature, purify it, and then put it into the distribution system?
Not per se, as part of this project. I think reverse osmosis certainly has applicability, but on a scale of this nature, there still would not be not only one sufficient capacity but the costs for a system of that nature would far, far outweigh something that they're looking at now. So it was not looked at in detail for those very reasons.
Well, have you also considered the seepage from the yards and so forth that are containing chemicals? They go into the ground and probably pollute the Ipswich water basin.
I think it's maybe a different question. There's certain, I mean, the water that North Reading has to provide has to meet water quality standards, national water quality standards, so that's occurring. The details of some of the other things you mentioned, I'm not familiar with.
I think, just follow on to that, there's a federal stormwater requirement and permit that the town has to abide by, and we are putting time and effort into that as we speak. In fact, at some point, the Board of Selectmen is going to have to take a look at the cost of meeting the federal standard and determine whether or not that should be part of the water rate. But that's not the subject for tonight. The subject for tonight is the why, the how, so that we can get a sustainable water supply for the future to support our economic development plans and to provide quality water for our entire community with the capacity for the growth of the community.
Well, certainly reverse osmosis is a possibility, and I'm just asking if that has been considered, and it has not. So my next question, of course, is the water quality coming out of the Ipswich River water basin, that since everyone here is using chemicals to process for their lawns and things like that, I'm concerned about the seepage into the Ipswich water basin. How long have we got before this becomes a factor?
Well, relative to drinking water, you have protection areas around your wells, so that water is being captured and treated to national water quality standards. Now, I wanted to address your reverse osmosis because each of those proposals, whether we gather stormwater or we take it from the ground or we even capture water that leaches through somebody's front lawn, that's a diversion from the Ipswich River Basin, which we're capped at. The town can only pull 0.96 at a maximum, and any new source would require tremendous permitting. Actually, the town gave up the permit to withdraw less water because the requirements were far more than to keep the water. I mean, it's a very convoluted process that is undergoing, and the state is mandating that towns be more and more cautious about the way that they withdraw water. So for example, even if it was cost effective to find and do reverse osmosis and collect rainwater, which from a large picture sense, the economics don't work very well. Even if you could, that would still be considered a withdrawal from the basin. So you'd have to go through all this permitting process, which ultimately would lead you to a place where they wouldn't allow you to do it.
That and this project will actually get you away from the Ipswich River Basin.
Well, my other concern is about the septic systems that we have in town. And there is a partial purification process in the septic systems. And since all of the homes around here have septic systems, isn't it possible to collect water from those and bring them in for processing, to purify them to drinking water standards?
It's very difficult to do wastewater reclaim, turn it into drinking water. It is done in certain places, but it's not something that's done in this area because there's plenty of water around. It costs a lot of money to do. And again, you're diverting water because that water that's in the septic system that goes into the ground is going into the Ipswich River. So if you grab that water, you're now diverting it, and so it becomes a supply from the Ipswich River. So there's this whole balance thing going on in the background. And we're trying to avoid untipping that balance and creating a situation where permitting becomes harder or impossible, ultimately.
Gentlemen, name and address.
Going to activate, I guess, but maybe you can repeat the question. Basically, when you're drawing in a couple of million gallons a day of water and they're dumping it into the groundwater table, North Reading is already pretty wet. Is there any significant concern of increasing the level of the water table to the point where you're increasing the hassle of the homeowners have to slide by?
I'm not familiar with your drainage issue.
It's no more than we're doing.
What's that?
It's no more than we're doing.
I'll repeat the question. The questioner's concerned about if we're bringing in more water, will that result in a change in the groundwater level or more water in people's basements or something like that? Ultimately, we're looking at a fairly even balance here. We will be drawing in a little bit more, but those waters are going to be ending up in the groundwater and in the Ipswich River, which is already starved for water. It could use the extra water at this point, so it won't create any local impact to anybody in that way.
Mrs. Martin?
I have a couple of questions. You talk about was there any consideration in withdrawing water from the Merrimack River and wheeling it through Andover, where there are existing connections, rather than having to go from the MWRA and build new infrastructure through Reading to bring it to North Reading?
As I had mentioned earlier, or Michael may have mentioned, the select board had reached out to Andover over a year ago and said they did not have the capacity to supply them. So we were relying on them to, if that was an option to them, I think it was something that they would have brought up at the time. So it was not something specifically that North Reading took a look at going to the Merrimack themselves, no.
And then my second question is, you talk about maintaining a backup emergency supply with the town of Andover. And I understand that could be North Reading's emergency connection, if Andover is amenable to that. But hydraulically speaking, how does the connection with Andover then become Reading's emergency backup? If you have to put a booster station in at the south end of North Reading to bring water from Reading into North Reading, how can it go the other way?
Yep, in simple terms, Reading's at a lower pressure than North Reading, which is at a lower pressure than Andover. So to move water from Reading to Andover, you would have to pump it. But to move water from Andover to Reading the other way, it'll flow by gravity. No pumping will be required.
Another follow-up question to that is, if MWRA treats their water differently than Andover, i.e. in terms of disinfection.
Great question. Great question.
What do you do in the event that you need emergency supply from Andover and you're mixing it with a different treatment chemicals?
Great question. I want to expand on it a little bit, because as part of the analysis, we actually looked at the differences in water quality between MWRA and what North Reading does right now. Obviously, when North Reading switches to MWRA water, their current disinfection practices will go away, and that won't matter. In the event of an emergency where they have to take water from Andover into North Reading, yes, there could potentially be water quality issues. However, that being said, we did a chlorination study as part of this project as well, and the water quality coming from Andover right at the interconnection has very, very little chlorine in it at that point, where we're thinking it's not going to cause a problem probably whatsoever, because there's very little. So it's going to be okay to mix the waters. In an emergency situation, it's possible that there could be issues, but that's also something that a community and the operators understand that they have to live with, and that it's a very temporary condition. They could, if you choose, North Reading wanted to, you could put the chemical feed facility at the interface between the two communities to deal specifically with that. But the likelihood of ever needing to rely on Andover for a backup, I don't want to say it's none, but it's pretty slim because of the redundancy that you'll have from MWRA. But that's a great question.
Gentlemen over here.
Yeah, back on slide 14, you showed a map of Reading's pipeline system, and it looks like there's two interconnections with Reading, one on Haverhill, one on Main Street, I think. You may have answered the question in that if our pipelines are high pressure than theirs, then maybe it can handle it, but is there any upgrades that are going to be needed along those corridors to handle the influx of water?
Right at the interconnection?
Yes.
At the interconnection between Reading and North Reading?
Correct. Well, I guess the general question, is the North Reading pipeline system adequate today to handle the new water coming in and all the different inflection points?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we looked at that. So we looked at, your water comes from different places throughout North Reading system. The amount of water that we're pumping in the system isn't going to really change. It's just where its location is. And we did look at the hydraulics at that interconnection, and there's going to be no impact.
And where's the pumping station?
Somewhere off of, in the vicinity of the Mill Street area. The pipeline that's coming from Reading is going to come up, or there's already a pipeline there. It's going to come up Mill Street, and then from the boundary between Reading and North Reading on Mill Street, there north, we don't know where, we have to identify property. Could be within hundreds of feet of that location. It could be a quarter mile away. We don't know. That's one of the first things we're going to be doing when we get into the design, is doing a property evaluation to find out the best place to site it.
So all the construction that's going to happen is just in Reading, there's none in North Reading?
No, maybe I didn't explain it. There will be a little bit in Reading. There's going to be a pipe that is going to need to be extended from the Reading line to wherever this booster pump station goes. That's it. But we don't know we don't know exactly where it's going to go yet.
So the reason behind my question is you talked about redundancies in the upgrades between Woodward and Reading on West Street, and they had to shut down that street for a long period of time. And my question is basically, is there any, can we expect any traffic issues with what's to come?
Not in North Reading. Yeah, there's very little construction that's needed in North Reading. We did a master plan for you folks as well, long-term plans. There are some water main upgrades here and there, but there's very little that needs to occur construction-wise within North Reading. Thank Reading for that.
Gentlemen, or woman in the corner, sorry.
I'll just speak up. I have two questions. One is, what's the water source for the MWRA, please? What's the water company?
Quabbin Reservoir?
Quabbin Reservoir? Okay, thank you.
And what you said.
My other question is, I saw that after we get the hookup to the MWRA, we'll shut down the North Reading water sources. Why not just have the MWRA fulfill the delta that we're missing? Why have it take over all the town's water?
That's a great question as well. If you remember, one of the goals we had was to try to simplify the existing sources and the operation of the existing system. It'll take enormous capital just to upgrade those systems, just to get them in working order. And even then still, the supplies are degrading in capacity. They're not pumping 30 or 40% less, and that's where they're going to stay. That capacity's continue to go down. So the delta between upgrading and making the full change to MWRA made a lot more sense. In addition, if we had to do that, dealing with MWRA water and North Reading water, now we've complicated the treatment process itself, because now we would be dealing with two different water qualities. It would make operations quite complicated at that point. So for that reason, that was the reason they either wanted to do all or nothing, was what we felt the best approach was.
So that's part of the financial analysis?
Yep.
They do it? Okay, great. Thank you.
Gentlemen, blue shirt. Yes, could you state your name?
not the lady, I'm the man.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Joseph Simino, and I'm a resident at 31 North Ridge Drive in North Reading. My question is, when we do tie in, and if we do, tie in with the Mass Water Resources, the first question I have is, number one, does that solve our problem in North Reading of being the closed system that we have today?
I'm sorry,
A closed water system as we have today. It just goes to a dead end and basically lays there. By tying in with the WRA, does that alleviate that problem?
If I understand your question, no.
Okay. So by tying in with them in that particular case, there's no advantage? Is that correct?
If I understand your question, correct.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, looking at it as a business, and I start to look at it, what's the $307,000 or $70,000 we're paying for redevelopment? I mean, the mall, I mean, the Mass Resources. What is that for?
That's a financial question. Are the balance of your questions related to the business aspect of it? Because it may be worthwhile to see the slides related to that.
Fine, but I was just laying it together as a business plan and just putting it all together.
So I believe
Just trying to understand it.
the $307,000
Yes,
number is the.
And that's just a number that's thrown out as far as I'm concerned. As far as the business plan goes, you would expect the redevelopment authority to explain what that is and lay it out for you, X for piping, X for this, and so forth. We just get a number. What does that mean?
Sure. So that number, for those who don't know, is the annual projected assessment that we would pay the MWRA to effectively buy into the MWRA.
So we're not getting the water, we're basically buying into the system.
That's correct.
Okay. Then what's the initiative for them to proceed forward, to stop that, to solve our problem of a closed system, and initiate them to bring piping up Main Street and connect to the other end of the city so that we get a full-through system? And we're going to be paying them almost $7 million. Once you start paying to them, it's over. They do what they want to do, and they come into the city and do what they want to do as far as laying the pipes. If they decide to go no further, you're still continually paying for 25 years at $300 and X dollars a year to receive the water from the water resources.
So if I understand your question, you're asking with regard to what incentive there would be for the MWRA to improve our distribution system to address this issue?
Once they will not improve our distribution service, distribution, and furthermore, let me just try to get it right here. They won't move any further. If they don't, we have no control over whether they come any further, and stop right where they are. And we continually work through Reading. And then the next question from that is, working through North Reading, we have a third party here. We have Water Resources, we have North Reading, and then we have us. And we fall third in the list. They have the commodity, and we want to buy it. We haven't even negotiated with them. Why is $307,000 or whatever it is the number? Why aren't they paying for the additional water running through Reading as a deal when you do it when you're working in business?
So I think that there's a couple things that are being asked in the question, and the first thing I would speak to is that our distribution system in the town of North Reading will still be our responsibility.
Yes.
I think if you were talking about the MWRA expanding its system to the town of North Reading, the expectation would be that we would be paying for that expansion to occur, which is something that I think would incur quite a bit of additional cost, separate and distinct from the town of Reading improvements that we described earlier, and which we will describe financially later on. But just to make clear the issue of the $307,200 number, that is, again, an annual cost for the buy-in. It's not the purchase of water. It's the buy-in to a system that has been constructed over time, over an extensive amount of time, which exists, which we will take advantage of. And for us to become part of that, we need to buy into it.
So why wouldn't that money be used to upgrade our systems locally and upgrade our purification systems and the other things we have in the
So it's a great question, and there are programs that are available locally. I'm going to ask the folks from the MWRA if they could speak to it, because we will then be able to take advantage of some programs that are available out of the MWRA for our local distribution system. Still, our responsibility.
But we're still relying on them, and we have, right now, we control our destiny. Once we bring them in, it's gone. So if we don't strike the deal as of now, we end up with whatever they want to tell us. If they tell us water is going up 20%, it's 20%. At least it's not your own, when you control it yourself, you then control what it's going to cost you and how it's going to be operated, how it's going to be done.
So-
With a no-loop system like we presently have, if the pipe goes down in Reading in that area that you just put it, we have no water in town.
So
You have to
there's
open up the other system in Andover and then pay a higher price again, just like we're paying right now from Reading when the water is being coming through their town.
So you've
We have to give them a gift.
Sir, you've asked a few questions. I want to try to tackle each of them.
They're all lumped together.
They are, but I mean, I need to provide the answers to be able to answer the questions.
Well, then you could mix it in and say, yeah, one question at a time, kind of limits to what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Do you have more you'd like to say?
Yeah, I do. As a business deal, I really don't think this is in the best interest of this town. And
Okay.
being a resident here for 12 years, I'm looking for what's right for North Reading, not for what's the easy way out, which is to call them and say, do it, and tag us with another expense. We have a school expense we're facing now. We just heard about possibly drainage, which they're recommending that we do. They're not recommending about water. We're just doing it because our systems are older. But if we have to kick in $300 and X number of dollars a year, over 20 years, that's 25 years. And even though it's a free giving, they'll give it to us, that we have to pay it, that's over $7 million. We could fix our own system internally for that kind of money and have more water.
That's a great point. The business questions that you've asked, I think, are very relevant questions, but I believe that the slides that are upcoming are going to answer many of them. But with regard to your question concerning our distribution system and improvements to the distribution system, I'm going to ask the MWRA to speak to that. Mr. Lasky, if you would mind.
Sir, if I could, you've made the statement about it's a business. Well, if you think about this as a business, you're basically buying in a portion of our business or our company. You're buying, in a sense, a share of it, and that you are going to become a member of a larger system that is a regional water system. And the entrance fee is basically to have you buy a share of the cost that has been incurred by the other members for really what is considered, and I can say this confidently, one of the best water systems in the country. So you're going to be buying into a share of a massive reservoir out in Central Mass Reservoir that at the source, because it's so large, has 5 years worth of storage. It has drinking water that meets the federal drinking water standards in the reservoir because it's so protected. You're going to be buying a share of a state-of-the-art water treatment plant in Marlboro that includes ozone and UV as the two disinfectants. So we have dramatically reduced the amount of chlorine that we need to use, which is a very positive thing. We have a state-of-the-art corrosion control system out at that plant that allows us to pass as a water system the federal lead requirements. We've all read about Flint, Michigan, and a lot of stories about that. Well, as a system, our water meets or is below the threshold for any action. You're going to buy into a series of tunnels and storage tanks, including 2 in Stoneham, that depending on how our system is configured, will be storing your water, and 2 pump stations in Stoneham that will guarantee you. And frankly, you're going to buy a share of the new pipeline that we're building in Reading that will provide redundancy not only for Reading, but also for you if you are so inclined to join our system. We as a regional water system provide water support services to our member communities, including zero-interest loans that will allow you to borrow money from us at a zero-interest cost to improve your own system. It's a pipeline assistance program, and the theory is, even if we have the greatest water in the world and the greatest large mains, if your system is old and antiquated, you're putting clean water into bad pipes. So there's that kind of assistance, there's leak detection assistance, there's lab assistance on lead issues. So you become part of a larger company, if you will. But I think it is important to realize that your local water system will remain autonomous and under the control of your folks, because we are the wholesalers. If you think back to the business analogy, we are a wholesaler, you are the retailers. You are the people who serve the residents of Reading and possibly North Reading, and we will be the wholesaler that will provide you with, frankly, not the most, the best drinking water in the country.
Can I just rebuttal some of your questions, rebut back to some of your answers back to us. Second of all, first thing, at the $307,000 or whatever it is a year we're going to be paying you, we upgrade our water system to have to meet all those standards, or we wouldn't be able to put the system online to give us the water. Is that correct, sir?
I don't know of any upgrades to your distribution system that you would have to make.
Well, we would have to make them according to what basically you have. Or we wouldn't be able to put the water into, we wouldn't be able to put water into. If we have a state mandate that mandates what we must put back into the system. Is that correct? If we meet those mandates, we are able to put the water into, please, the gentleman next to you, please stop shaking your head, no, because I am right. Okay, the second part of it is, I turn around, I'm saying to you, if we put brand new systems in our drinking water, at the place where it gets purified, and the water comes out from those brand new systems, they have to meet the standards of the state. Am I correct?
Yes, I think that's...
Well, that's the question I asked. You said yes.
That's the fundamental decision I think that the town has to make. What is the best course to go?
That's my whole point.
To try to rebuild or upgrade, and the gentleman from Wright Pierce has been talking about this. What's the difference between you trying to upgrade your antiquated wells and your antiquated treatment system versus coming into our greater system where we would take care of that for you? And I think that's the cost benefit that you've now analyzed and you'll have to look at it.
I don't think it is, because my question to you is, if we do and we get our system up online and it does meet the same qualifications that you're providing, we control our destiny. We don't control it with your company.
I would gather that your distribution currently meets those standards because you're just delivering water as we speak with DEP's approval. So us putting our water into your system wouldn't change any of that.
No, I didn't say it would. I didn't say it would. I'm just saying that if we upgrade our system, instead of paying you the $307,000 or $70,000 a year, and we put it into our system by upgrading, within 10 years we'd have our system more than upgraded, and we would be in terrific shape to control our own destiny. And that's what that's trying to get to.
Sir.
Which means we have our own water, we're not paying $12 or $15 a gallon.
Okay, so I think we have a,
My biggest fundamental problem, maybe I'm misunderstanding, is you don't have enough water. You need more water, and you don't have enough water.
Sir, one thing that you're missing is that under the DEP and the Ipswich watershed regulations, the town of North Reading cannot draw, even if we had perfect wells, more than 1 million gallons a day.
Even though they shut down Reading.
Regardless, right? When we draw water out of the ground, we draw it to a permit. We're not allowed to draw water, any amount of water we want. We have to live within the permit. When the Ipswich River was declared an emergency with respect to the fact that it didn't have any water in it, right? Rules were set in place. They were set in place by the DEP, and we lived by those rules. And at the time, the town was grandfathered 1 million gallons a day. And that is not enough, and that's why we buy water from Andover. What we're proposing here is to eliminate two sources of water. The Andover water rate is higher than what we're going to be paying for the MWRA. I'm not talking about the buy-in cost, right? And we will eliminate the maintenance of our wells, which are deteriorating, and when we get into the financials, see how much money we'd have to invest to bring them up to a reasonable level of supply. And two is we shut down our treatment plants, which there are two, and the pumping related to it, and the labor, which, by the way, happens to be very close to the savings there to the cost of buy-in. But I think those questions, everyone should wait for the rest of the presentation.
But my only other question from that is, if we sink new wells or open up the wells, our capacity grows just from the fact that we opened up and put new wells in operation. In other words, we will gain because our wells are now 20% less effective than they were when they were first put in. With the new cleaning of the wells and putting them in the ground, we will gain that capacity, and we will not be violating anybody's, the state or anybody else's thing to us, as far as regulation to us.
Yes, but as you saw of the chart, the town needs more than 1 million gallons a day.
I'm not denying that.
Okay.
I'm just saying that to you, but we increase a 20% increase, then what does that mean? That we need today? It doesn't mean that we need that many gallons a day. What it means is that whatever the pumps then start producing and giving to us, from that point, we will know how many gallons a day we need additional. My just feeling is with the resources, the mass resources of great water, they have been since 1918. The system was run by the MDC, and it was a great system. It went down the tubes because they neglected it for a while, brought it back up. We got so many executives here making the kind of money that is unheard of at our level. I just don't want to see us get caught in that web of where we're going to be caught and stuck in that web of where we're going to be paying high costs of water when we have it available to us here with a little bit of effort. The easy way is to go to them. The hardest way is to take a stance and say, hey, business-wise, what is really the right way to go? As far as them giving you the best water in the world, you put in the purifying systems that they're using, and we'll have the best water in the world.
Okay, sir, I think you've made your point. Are there anyone else that have questions before we move on to the gentleman over there? And then I know you have some questions.
My name is Rick DeGuian, Freeland Road resident, 15 years. My question is on private wells and a little bit on the Ipswich River. I don't know if you guys can answer the water department from North Reading. I work for Linfield. The watering town of Linfield is split in half. It's half MWRA and half private wells. The half that's private wells abuts North Reading. And I talked to the water district manager there, and they just tapped into their wells, and they got more water than ever now. I don't know why the DEP's shutting us down, and the watering town of Linfield has plenty of water to supply half that town. I feel resources like you saying, we should check into private wells and we still have a way of tapping into them. I don't know why they're being shut down by the DEP. When a watering town is half their town is supplied by well water, and we have plenty of water. And my other question is on the Ipswich River, the city of Lynn, I don't know if anyone can answer, the city of Lynn has a pumping station there in North Reading. I don't know how much water they pump out of North Reading. Do we have any rights to that, or why do they have, the city of Lynn, the water pipe that's right in Linfield, that's the city of Lynn. I wonder if anyone can answer that question, why Lynn is tapping our water.
I'm going to ask the water superintendent to speak to that question.
The whole issue with the Ipswich River dates back to the early 1980s. The state implemented what was known as the Water Management Act. And basically communities between 81 and 86 documented how much water they were withdrawing from the Ipswich River basin. Based on that, they were grandfathered to a volume that they could continue to withdraw from the Ipswich River basin. The city of Lynn, because they had that prior history, under the Water Management Act, were given the rights to withdraw and continue to use that pumping station from the Ipswich River. North Reading has never drawn one drop of water directly from the Ipswich River. So our wells are along Martins Brook, which is part of the Ipswich River aquifer, but because they had that existing source, and there are other sources. Reading had a volume that they were grandfathered into use from the Ipswich River basin. Danvers, Middleton has the same type situation. So they're allowed that because they were grandfathered that under the state's Water Management Act rights. What limits North Reading from a permitting standpoint is that it's the Water Management Act. We only were drawing just under 1 million gallons a day during that period. That's what we're currently limited to. So even if we put in all brand new wells, the most we can withdraw from the Ipswich River basin is that just under 1 million gallons a day.
Also, our representatives and senators that we have representing the town and the State House haven't moved forward to try to see if we could get any more water and try to help the situation that we're in. I don't think the state is unkind in trying to help somebody who's been isolated from water, especially. That's probably the most. That's the biggest commodity there is as far as staying alive.
I'm going to ask Senator Tarr to speak to that, Senator.
We absolutely have exploited it, and we've exploited it to no end because the capacity of the Ipswich River is limited.
And if we continue to withdraw withdrawal capacity, then we're going to stress the river to the point where it's not going to serve anyone effectively, number one. Number two, not only has the legislature fought over this for the last several years, but in addition to that, there have been litigation. There have been lawsuits filed by various communities challenging their allocations under the Water Management Act, and those lawsuits have been unsuccessful. And in fact, in the communities where they've been filed, they've actually jeopardized the existing allocations that the communities are getting. And so it would be nice if the Ipswich River could produce more water, but the fact is it only has a limited amount, and that river is considered to be one of the most stressed in the United States of America. And so if you try to make a case that someone should be able to withdraw more from it, the case is flatly rejected, legislatively, administratively, and judicially.
Let me ask you a question. With Reading dropping off.
Sir, I didn't recognize you. You've had a turn. The gentleman here in the green shirt has been waiting to ask a question. We'll get back to you.
Yes, thank you. Robert Atkinson Jr., 82 Elm Street. And my question concerns a little bit of history. In the early 70s, we just moved to Winfield, and a joint use reservoir between North Reading and Winfield Center Water District was proposed. And at that time, they took land, and proposed cost was somewhere in the order of $6 to $12 million in 1974 dollars. I suspect now that cost would be much higher, probably $60, $70 million. Was that included in any of the analysis of potentially building another, reviving that reservoir proposal between the joint use Winfield Center Water District and North Reading? And I'd like to follow up. Thank you.
Is that the no pond proposal?
It's a swamp fire. Mark's got it.
Good, Mark.
I can kind of address that. That would be a new source. All new sources in the Ipswich River Basin are not being considered. It would be taking additional water out of the Ipswich River Basin. If you look at a map of the town of North Reading, up around Swan Pond, the town owns a great deal of land. Back in the mid-'70s, the town took that land. They were going to build our own reservoir, pump from the Ipswich River into that reservoir, and use that as a surface water supply for the town. We actually, if you go back and you look at the legislation in 1974, the town had the right to take 5 million gallons a day out of the Ipswich River Basin and pump it into that reservoir. We never took 1 gallon out of the Ipswich River. With the Water Management Act, all those rights, legislative rights, went away. So that it's not an option at this point to take and develop any new reservoirs in the Ipswich River Basin.
Do you have a
So that's
follow-up?
kind of a 1 million gallons a day limit that we restricted. We can't draw more than 1 million gallons a day groundwater from any source, regardless of where it comes from. If we upgraded the wells, if we did anything else, we're limited to 1 million gallons a day, regardless of what capital expenditures we make.
Correct.
Okay, that's fine, as long as I understand the problem a little bit better, bounding the problem. And then, of course, the other side of the coin is the wastewater issue, which has sort of been a back burner issue. Most of the focus tonight has been on the supply side. But I did have a question regarding the wastewater treatment side, which involves groundwater flows into the Ipswich watershed. And I guess my question regarding treatment and potential areas for sewers, why was it essentially restricted to Main Street, Route 28, and Concord Street? Was that primarily because of the commercial development in those sectors? And what about potential extension of a future sewage treatment plant to other areas in town? My biggest concern is Murphy's Law striking and then having our septic system fail, spending $10,000 or $15,000 in current dollars to replace it, and then have you guys come along in a couple of years and tell me I got to spend $15,000 to connect to a sewer system, and then with a betterment fee on top of it. A friend of mine, his parents went through this up in Gloucester, the Magnolia. They brought sewers into Magnolia. So I guess my question is, and have any options been considered for future ground wastewater treatment in the other portions of town, primarily along Route 62 and out towards the Wilmington line?
We did a very extensive needs analysis, basically looking at all kinds of attributes of parcels, how big the parcel was, what kind of soil was there wetlands nearby. There were about 30 different criteria that we looked at, and we combined them all together doing some statistical work, to determine what the needs were. We also looked at where there might be tight tanks, because there are people that can't even have a septic system. They have a tank and they have to get that pumped out periodically. And so there were a lot of those factors. We put them all together, and we came up with these 3 areas that we mentioned. Those were the highest need in the town for sewer. There are other scattered needs throughout, but those represented the highest need, and that in the balance, that represented an appropriate amount of flow that we could reasonably manage. If we were to do the whole town, that would take considerably more effort, and there isn't a way within the current regulations for us to basically cause the whole town to be sewered and treated and then disposed of that wastewater.
What about an incremental approach where you at least leave room for future expansion of the proposed treatment system, and then incrementally adding on over time as budget and regulatory environment permits?
That would certainly be open to you. We had to take the approach of looking at regulatory as it exists today, and that 20 years down the road, things could change, but we have to kind of anticipate what we know today and deal with it that way, and that's why the plan looks the way it does.
Okay, yeah, I was worried about my worst case scenario. Murphy has a nasty way of rearing his ugly head at the worst possible time, and it usually happens, like I said, with my wife, it happens about 6 months after we replace the septic system and spend lots of money. But thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Mr. Prisco?
I just think a lot of the questions have been tied back to digging our own wells again, drilling our own wells again. I think this actually would be a really good time to get to the rest of the presentation, because I think when you start seeing some of the information associated with the wells, we've heard now legislatively why, environmentally why, it's not a real feasible option. But I think when you start looking at the financial side of it, I think it even justifies it even more than either one of those. So that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, just because it's 8:15, we really made a commitment to the community to try to keep this to 2 hours. And I really would like to see some other folks in the audience get an opportunity to speak. That would be my suggestion.
Good suggestion. Mr. Gilberto, would you proceed with the financial?
Certainly.
Someone hit the lights?
There's one more question here.
No. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on my question about, we were talking about sewer systems here, and part of we all have septic systems, and a lot of that could be reclaimed and used for drinking water if we adopt reverse osmosis.
I think you're right.
Those are very effective ways, and I'm not sure that the cost is prohibitive. I mean, we should be able to get some cost on that to determine.
You gotta be ready to roll.
But if we're planning on in the future using a sewer processing plant, then we certainly ought to look at reclaiming the water from these septic systems. Most of the water in there is just from flushing the toilet, because I think they estimate that 50% of the water coming from residential homes is just toilet water without any other sediment in it. So,
Mr. Perkins.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Perkins, you've made this point a couple of times, and I don't mean to be rude and cut you off, but there are a lot of other people in the audience that have come to hear the whole presentation, and after the presentation is finished, we'll stay as long as necessary to answer your questions.
I can't hear you.
He just said that there's a presentation that we need to conclude for the interest of everybody in the audience, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of it. Mr. Prisco.
Mr. Gilberto, would you proceed, please?
Great. So the next slides will pertain to the financial and business aspect of the town's planning efforts for this project. We have the capital costs associated with it, the rate impacts that we've been discussing for the past year, potential opportunities for financial aid and assistance, and economic development impacts as well. So just going through to provide comparatively for everyone to see here, we have on the left-hand column, the existing infrastructure that we have and the existing arrangement that we have, and on the right-hand column, we have the switch to the MWRA water service. And the first thing you see up on the top is the difference between the two. At this point, we've already identified we have insufficient capacity for our needs. When we project out to the future, we look to the right, the capacity is virtually unlimited from the MWRA. And as we move through, you see from a financial standpoint, probably the most significant thing for everyone here to understand about our existing wells is that we are projecting a need to invest $9.6 million in the next 5+ years in those wells. And that will still only maintain the amount of capacity that we've been discussing here this evening without any room for the growth that we've described is going to be necessary for the future. On the right-hand side, the issue with regard to the costs associated with the MWRA project, the buy-in, which is to become essentially become a member of the MWRA or to become a customer of the MWRA, projected at $7.68 million for the capacity that we believe we will need in the year 2033. That's the projection that we use in terms of the capacity we would buy in. The capital cost, which is the cost of the construction required by the town, both in North Reading and in the town of Reading, projected at $9.945 million in future costs. And that includes design and construction. Again, we noted the issues of capacity in the second column, third column down, if you include the blue one. The issues with regard to the growth. We cannot satisfy the growth in the existing system that we have versus the future conditions that we believe we can satisfy on the based on the projections. We have the unknown relative to the rate structure with the town of Andover, which has taken on a couple of iterations depending upon the intermunicipal agreement that we have, versus with regard to the MWRA, yes, we are definitively subject to the rates that they determine on an annual basis, but we know that the structure with which that's determined has been well established. The regulatory issues I think we've spoken to at length with regard to the Ipswich River versus the minor regulatory risk, which is largely on, at this point from a supply standpoint, the MWRA as it is. We would reduce that risk. And then finally, the issue with regard to the operations. We need to maintain or increase our existing manpower for operations and maintenance of our water supply system. We are projecting up to a $300,000 reduction in annual expenses in the form of labor and operating expenses that would be reduced should we no longer be producing water here in the town of North Reading. So some of you may be aware the Board of Selectmen had a discussion on Monday evening in a workshop setting to look at potential ways that we could assess the cost of the capital end of the construction of the project within the town. And for the past year, we've been discussing assessing that as part of the water enterprise, which would be through the water enterprise rate structure. And we have said we've been carrying all of the costs in the projections with the understanding that we expect to be able to reduce some of those costs based on the availability of assistance, particularly at the state level. But for planning purposes and for projection purposes, we're carrying all of those costs. The Board of Selectmen, through its evaluation, has identified a potential option to assess the construction portion of the charge. And I'll go back here. That's the $9.945 million associated with capital construction and design work on the tax rate here in town. And when we went through and did the analysis, if we were to take that portion of the cost and project it onto the average single-family tax bill, which for fiscal year 2016 was approximately $502,000 as is identified here, we project that it would result in an anticipated annual impact on the average single-family home of approximately $109. And the reason that the board wanted to look at that was the issue of the ability to deduct that as a property tax paid on your income tax forms. That's not something that can presently be done by our residents with the water enterprise or your water bill. So moving forward, this is just a chart that basically identifies that. Right now, the average single-family home at $502,000. Our tax rate, $16.41. When we went through and did the calculation, it results in, for that, we're using a round number of $10 million for the capital investment, would result in 22 cents per $1,000 worth of evaluation. When you project that on that valuation of $502,000, it's $109 in taxes for the average single-family home. So we tried to, and I'm going to ask Mark to be ready to jump in with regard to this as well. We tried to also project this a couple of ways if we were to keep it all in the water rate. And the two scenarios that we've been looking at are, first, to equally divide it amongst all of the accounts here in town, or second, to assess it as part of the water rate, which would then be assessed, it would result in it being paid depending upon your consumption. Those are the two scenarios that we looked at. There was a third scenario that we looked at with regard to the meter size that we determined it wasn't much of a difference when compared to the first scenario. So to provide a summary, and there's a more detailed sheet that I'm going to ask Mr. Clark, the water superintendent, to speak to, but to give you a broad summary, if we were to assess that $10 million, take the debt service, meaning the amount to repay the borrowing for that work to be paid for, and we were to assess it evenly amongst all of our accounts, it would result in approximately $126 worth of a water bill expense for each account. If we take the annual impact of that buy-in cost, the $7.68 million that I referenced before, right up there on the top right-hand side, and project it forward, it results in a $307,200 annual expense in the water budget, which, if equally distributed, is approximately $63.47 per account here in North Reading. If we were to go through and divide up those costs based on your water consumption, which is how you are billed right now, with the exception of the flat administrative fee, we looked at an equivalent usage of approximately 16.3% on the increase on usage charges, which is going to be described in the next slide. That's for the $10 million in capital investment. For the buy-in, that $307,200 annually, it equates to an 8.1% increase on usage charges. Now, some of you may remember when we discussed long-range water rate planning a year ago in this room and in the town hall, we discussed the potential need for rate increases over multiple years. We factored in the savings as well that I described earlier, which is the reduction in cost for personnel and the reduction in costs associated with supplies and the operations of our water treatment supplies. So that's what brings those numbers down in the long term. In terms of the water rate impact, I'm going to ask Mark to speak to it in detail. He's got a chart here that will kind of describe what it means for a variety of different users, be you a low water volume user, the average user, or a high volume user here in town. So I'll turn it over to Mark for this portion of it.
So there's a lot of information on this one slide. I'm going to start at the very bottom where the notes are. It says I'm presenting 3 different classes of bills for 2 different options. So a low volume user we're referring to as anyone that uses 40,000 gallons per year or less. Basically 10,000 gallons a quarter. That would keep you at Tier 1 in our water rates. We have a 3-tier rate system. A medium volume user, and this is a typical number thrown out there, is 90,000 gallons per year per household. I know there are a lot of rate studies done in the state, and they typically reflect that volume of usage when they compare between Reading and North Reading and all the other communities. And then a high volume usage in this chart reflects someone using 225,000 gallons per year. Just in terms of how does that break out in our actual uses, then note number 2, about 37.5% of our accounts fall into that 40,000 gallon or less category. Basically 85% of the accounts in North Reading fall at the 90,000 gallon or less threshold, which would be the medium category. And 98% of our accounts, we do not have many, obviously as we've been talking about septic here in North Reading, we don't have a lot of very big water users in North Reading. 98% of our accounts fall at that 225,000 gallons per year or less. So option 1 was just basically take the 2 different costs, and again, the first half of this, the capital cost, this is an alternative to putting it on the tax rates, or I should say the tax rates were an alternative to this solution. So we're not saying your taxes are going to go up $109 a year, and then because of this, your water rate's going to go up $126 because of the capital. That's kind of an either-or scenario. So if the decision were made to put it on the tax rates, it will be $109 per year. If we're meant to put it on the water rates, it would increase that, where it says capital impact, $126 per year. It's an either-or scenario. Again, then we have the buy-in cost. Yeah, so in that column. And then the buy-in impact's about $63 per year. Obviously, if you go all the way over to the right-hand side, if we were to put everything on the water rates and use this as our methodology of charging it, who does it impact? Sees the highest impact from this? It's the low volume water user. Why? Because you're taking a significant flat number and putting it on top of, they have the lowest current bill because they use the less water. So the impact to them, fairly high, a 55% increase. You step down to the high user, the percentage increase to them is only about 6%, even though it's the exact same dollar increase. It's just because it's spread over more volume. The option two, the bottom three lines there, reflect putting it on the water rates, which is a much more consistent way of spreading the cost across all users. So you see the low volume user, the capital impact has about a $53 increase to their bill, the buy-in about $26, the total about $80 per year, which is about 23% of their water bill. Again, getting down to the end, the medium users 24%, the high-end users, again, about 24.5%. So those were kind of the two options that were looked at, and the numbers that fall out relative to putting these costs on the water rate. Again, this is not taking the savings into consideration. This is strictly what are the effects of putting the debt service on the water rate and putting the buy-in costs on the water rate.
Just to offer maybe a summary to incorporate the two slides. If we were if you were if we were to go with option one and distribute it equally amongst all the accounts, and you were the average, a medium user or below, if we were to take just the capital, it would be $126.02 on your annual water bill. If we were to combine the two, again, it'd be $189.49. If we were to just take the buy-in and put it on your water bill, it'd be $63.47. And if we were to take the capital cost and put it on your tax bill, it'd be that $109 that I mentioned earlier on your tax bill. So that's just to give you a brief summary of how it would all break down. With regard to the issue of aid and assistance, there's a number of options that are out there. We do have a community compact cabinet with the Commonwealth where they've given us funding to continue our effort to explore issues relative to infrastructure. This is more for planning than anything else. The MassWorks infrastructure program is probably the largest program that's out there that provides cities and towns funding to defray the cost of infrastructure investment, such as the type of investment that we're looking to make here in North Reading. And we do intend to apply for a MassWorks grant as soon as this year to offset the costs. The Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund is an option that's out there as well that we may look at, and one of the options that needs to be considered is the interest rates and whether that's beneficial to us or not. And then finally, the discussion that we have ongoing with our state legislators for potential grant opportunities. I can't stress enough, for planning purposes and for purposes of the community discussion, we are carrying, in the slides that are prior to this, all of the expenses. Any of these programs are made available with the exception of the Community Compact Cabinet would potentially reduce that number. I'll speak briefly to the economic development impacts, which I think we've kind of spoken to earlier as well. The water infrastructure system is vital, obviously, to the health of the community and the long-term health of the community. Our environment, obviously, we've talked a lot about the Ipswich River watershed, but also the possibility for economic development. And forecasting forward the matters of water conservation that will be occurring in the coming years, as well as the conservation that's achieved by the improvements in plumbing fixtures, as well as the additional capacity, is what will allow for continued economic development here in town in locations such as the J.T. Berry property. Obviously, as we stated, we need that additional water capacity. We need to be able to maintain the water capacity we have as well to capture that new growth, which is important to assisting us with regard to the expense of operating town government. The MWRA connection through Reading, again, we've been collaborating since 2014, both technically and more recently with regard to the ongoing business discussions concerning an intermunicipal agreement between the communities. The estimated cost, $9.945 million. That buy-in, $7.68 million, would be financed by the MWRA and is repaid by the town, 25 years or at a 0% interest rate for that. So that concludes the business portion of the presentation. What we'll do is turn the lights on and we'll open it up for question and answer. Sure.
The board's strategic plan, the top two items on the strategic plan are economic development, necessary to provide relief from our taxpayers for our operating budgets, both school and town. And the second is water, which is necessary as part of our economic development plan. Now, we proposed here several different options for funding this. And as Michael said, we're pursuing low-interest loans and maybe even grants to offset it. The numbers that were presented tonight were based on the worst-case scenario. The board's looking for input on how our citizens feel about three methods of financing that we talked about this evening. And with that, we'll open it up for discussion. Maybe I'll stand up here just to...
Jeff last.
You have a question down here for long.
Mrs. Bailey.
Thank you, Marcy Bailey, 21 Duane Drive. First, I would like to thank the leaders of the town of Reading who are here for partnering with us and working with us to solve our water problem here in North Reading. So thank you for your time and effort on that, to you and your staff. I have a question on if you put the rate on the usage, and then I guess I'll make a comment with my preference. What if usage goes down in the town? What if people start conserving and using a lot less than they have? How does that impact?
The water is a water enterprise, and it needs to be balanced. So as we do every year when we set the water rates, we look at the water revenue, and we look at our water costs, and we adjust the water rate accordingly. So if everybody gets very conservative with water use and we bring our water use down, that will have an impact on the water rate.
So it might be kind of like Prop 2.5 and the value of property versus, how much the tax rate goes up. You need to get the pot of money, you need to get one way or the other. If usage is less, the percentage increase might go up, so you get the same pot of money that you need.
Correct. It's an enterprise, and the rules associated with an enterprise are that the budget has to be balanced.
Well, since you asked for input, I guess I'll go first and go on a limb and give mine. Well, personally, it might be best for me to have it on my tax rate. I think it's fairest to be on the usage. I think that it's incumbent on families to decide how much water they're going to use, and for older people or single people who are, like trash, who may use less of the utility, then they pay less, and I think it helps them. So, like I said, while personally, for my own wallet, the tax rate might be best, I think it's fairest for all members of the town to go with the usage scenario.
Thank you. I just want to be clear that if we put it on the tax rate, we are only putting the capital portion of it, not the buy-in. We can't put the buy-in on the tax rate.
I understand, but still to give some relief or less impact on senior citizens or people who might be prone to use less water. I have a family and a teenager, and I'll take it on my water rate. Thank you.
Mrs. Martin?
I just have a couple questions about, you spent a whole lot of time discussing the water rate impact, but yet at the beginning of this whole presentation this evening, you talked about the sewer needs as well as the water needs, yet you've only focused on the water rate. Can you speak to that?
This is a work session on water. Why sewer was presented at the beginning is that when we set out on this with a DEIR, we had it for water and sewer. We've reached the point where it's time to split off, and I think our consultants just wanted to kind of bring everybody up to speed on where we are with that. To clarify, though, we're not anticipating water and sewer from MWRA as part of what we're talking about this evening. When we talk about our economic development, right, we talk about the need for sewer in our business districts, which would be Concord Street and Route 28. We also know there are some needs in a few other areas of town, like Martin's Pond, right? And we know that perhaps at some point the DEP is going to get after us to do something in that area. With respect to town buildings, which was in the original sewer plan, since we built and oversized the wastewater treatment plant here at the high school, our intent in the future is to expand by connecting up the town buildings, the schools, and the senior housing to this sewer plant. We have money in the in the forthcoming town meeting, right, to do an analysis and a study of those existing sewer septic systems to see what the state is, so we can do some planning as to when we move forward with the capital required to run piping from those buildings into the wastewater treatment plant. But that's as far as we're going with wastewater. I think Mr. Prisco might have mentioned that, or someone did, that we're also hoping to extend the MWRA sewer line, which doesn't affect any citizens, from Riverside Park, which is connected through, I think it's Wilmington. We're hoping to be able to extend that down Concord Street to the Bobcat facility. We, several years ago, did a study of the impact of the value, which would turn into additional taxes, of that property if we had sewer down there. You know, we might see the trucking companies disappear and some higher end, including a hotel or something to that effect, be built in that property. That is closer in time than any other sewer project that we have on our radar screen at this time. And I prefer not to talk any more about that, and we consider our discussion on water. Yes, ma'am. Name and address.
Alex Maxfield. I'm at Martin's Pond on Shore Road, and consequently I'm worried about Murphy. And I do want to support my friend here to the left. I'm single. I am a very small property. I would prefer my increase to be included in my utilization rates. I conserve. I've already been punished for my trash because I remember the sticker days. I've been here over 23 years. I put out 1 barrel of trash every 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm paid much more than I should for that. I'm supporting my neighbors who do not conserve. I don't want to start doing the same with my water. I think people should be rewarded for conservancy, not punished. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone on this side, anybody? Yes, sir.
Richard Grant, 3 Oakland Road. Getting back to the private wells and DEP, it seems like you're telling us the DEP is saying we can't have any well improvements here. Am I correct? We can't.
No, that's not true. What we said, we could invest the $9+ million in repairing or rebuilding or replacing our wells. But we would be limited again to only drawing just under 1 million gallons a day. That's the permit. That's what we have. That's under state law and the...
All right, so with that 1 million, that basically supplies roughly half the town, correct? Basically?
40%.
No.
40%.
Maybe you guys can maybe crunch the numbers, like maybe like Linfield, they split the town, half MWRA, half private wells. Maybe that's something we can look into too, so we're not totally under MWRA, and we still can supply half the town with improvements of wells, maybe 1/2 of MWRA. That's something to consider. I hope you guys consider.
One I would say is I'm not too familiar with how the Linfield water plumbing and structure is set up, but I think North Reading has been set up as, it's a fully integrated water system, so maybe you can answer that better than me, but no.
I mean, they're doing it in a watering town. I mean, so if they can do it, why can't we? I mean, just something to think about, crunching numbers. We can still use some of our wells and maybe supply half the town. It might save us, you know what I mean? It would be at the total mercy of the MWRA, basically.
The buy-in,
Something to think about.
the buy-in and the construction is still the same.
I just want to add, maybe, apparently was not clear, one point about the existing wells and the well fields. Yes, you could invest the money back into those and attempt to rehabilitate them. However, there's no guarantee, and personally we think you will not be able to gain that capacity back because they have degraded so far. And that's complicated because the property that they are on is very small, and there are very strict guidelines on where you can site new wells. And they need to have a certain protective area around them. So there's not an opportunity to actually drill new wells elsewhere in the vicinity to gain that capacity back. So I just want to make that clear.
Gentleman in the maroon shirt.
Are they a public entity or a private company?
They're public authority of the Commonwealth. I mean, so ask if you could speak.
We are an authority, we are a subdivision of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but not within the general appropriations process. We are outside of the main state government. We were created in 1984 and began operation in 1985, basically to clean up Boston Harbor, and they threw in the antiquated and unmaintained water system that we have now, as the gentleman said, brought it back to the higher standards that it is. So we are what's called a quasi-independent authority as a subdivision of the Commonwealth of Mass.
Thank you.
Are you a for-profit organization? No, sir. No, sir. We are a government agency.
I don't understand why we're going to pay $7.5 million to buy a product.
Mr. Lasky, I think explained that. All the surrounding communities that are part of MWRA have invested in the infrastructure. And if we are going to be a partner, then they're asking us to pay our fair share of the existing infrastructure, which is also pays for maintenance and so on and so forth of the system.
I know exactly what you're saying. But on the other side of the coin, I don't have to pipe out of a gas station to get gas there. So what's the difference?
How are you going to get the gas?
Mr. Prisco.
I think this slide is a perfect example of what the difference is. Let's say we don't do it, we go with what you're talking about. Let's take what we have.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, what other option do we have?
That's not my question.
But
I understand we don't have.
One at a time, please.
well, we picked an option that we feel is a sustainable water resource for the town. And that's
No
sustainable.
disrespect, he's not even talking about the same thing I
I
think.
am trying to, sir. I am trying to. I am.
You don't need to call me, sir, you know my name.
Let's.
Do you want me to try to finish the answer?
Mr. Prisco, you have the floor.
Thank you. The $7.68 million investment is something so we can continue to have that sustainable water resource for a very long time. It only goes for 20 years. Once it goes away, that expense is gone forever. We never pay into it again. That's it. So my children someday won't be paying into that. The rates should see a leveling on. It's a necessary evil, though. We have to share it. Other towns have already did it. It wouldn't be fair for the town of North Reading to jump into an infrastructure system that other towns have put a tremendous amount of money in. By the way, for example, Reading, they put a lot of money in. And by the way, they didn't get 0% interest like we did. And if I'm speaking out of school, you let me know.
No. We'll be back. We'll be back.
Don't worry, we remember that.
But the thing is, things have improved, and the MWRA's trying to work, the state's trying to work to improve it, to try to take the impact away from the residents the best they can. But that option on the right is the best option. It gets us a long-term solution. The one on the left, guess what we'll be doing again in another 5 or 10 years? We'll be reinvesting in those wells again to get the same water we have today, maybe less quality, maybe even less capacity than we have today. The future for any growth and any ability to have any sustained new growth is the only option is on the right. So that's why you have to pay that money. But it's one time, 20 years, we're done.
But I think the question was different though.
Then I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
You did, I'm sorry, I tried to tell you that.
Okay, any
Repeat the question. That's it.
gentleman in the back? Is that Mr. Mills?
You didn't get an answer on that question.
Let me take a shot at it.
Mr. Mills, hold. we'll let this gentleman ask his last question. Go ahead. You.
I understand we need to go this way. I understood it when you said it, I understood it when he said it, I understood it when everybody else said it. My simple question was, and I guess it's because it is, why do we have to pay $7.5 million to give them money? Again, I'll bring up the example, I don't have to buy car at a gas station to buy a gas station. The bottom line is, it is what it is.
Sir, we, through the chair, Mr. Mills, and I'll select you. Mr. Mills.
I just had a question, Dan Mills from 5 Green Meadow Drive. Is there any opportunity to capitalize on the 1 million gallons? Any way to, it's very difficult just to walk away from it and not see any benefit from that? Either transferring that to another community or getting some type of credit, environmental credit, some other opportunity here that we could take advantage of.
I don't know the full answer to that, but based on what we've gone through with respect to maintaining a permit, right, I would say...
It's still gonna cost us $9.6 million to maintain, it's actually $700,000, not even $1 million. Yeah, it's $71,000, 71,000 gallons a day. 710,000 gallons a day. It's still gonna cost us $9.6 million to... No, we can't sell the $1 million, we can't, first of all, we don't get 1 million gallons, that's our limit, but we only produce 0.71 of that.
Okay, is there any way to transfer that to some other community, somehow get some money out of that?
Not without upgrading the system in order to maintain it.
Mr. Clark.
I'm saying if we go to MWRA, can we monetize the benefit of the water that we have?
The short answer is no. The water is not North Reading's water. The Commonwealth views it as it belongs to the Commonwealth. They allotted a certain volume to us based on what we historically used. We don't have any monetary right to that water. We have no ability to sell it. I believe Reading will make the same statement. They've given up their permitted volume, and I don't think they received any money back for that, but they can speak to that.
I loved your idea, and we tried that. It's very common sense, very logical. We're giving up a scarce commodity. Someone else can use it. Maybe many people can use it, or maybe no one will, and the river's just better off. We tried every legislative angle that was possible. There's a lot of government organizations, from conservation down to this legislative area. We went every avenue we could for that. There is no way to monetize that. It is an asset, but what you don't do, or what I would suggest you not do, is give up your right to withdraw water in the future. That's the real value. Keep your right, even though you don't intend to use it. We turned off our water treatment plant when we joined the MWRA fully. We still have the right to withdraw from the river in the future if we ever change our mind. That's what's valuable, and no one's going to pay us for it, so we didn't give ours up.
Okay, just so we can get back, I know I'm going to recognize you after we finish with the woman in the yellow. Sure, I think we either cut you off or you had another question.
Well, no, I'm kind of interested in Reading's experience. My only experience with Reading and their water is longtime visiting friends who live up near the Austin Prep, and their water is undrinkable.
Oh, not anymore.
Now?
20 years ago.
Okay, so I haven't been there in years since they moved away.
Come down and try.
Dozens of years before that, it was bottled water.
Very good. We had issues.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of Reading's happy?
Yes. Well,
rather not pay for it.
Yeah.
For those that live in North Reading, a while ago, before the treatment plant was built, the people lived on the west side of town, lived with brown clothes, brown glasses, brown water.
Yeah.
Sir,
Gone.
the blue...
Just in response to what he was looking at, is why we have to pay to be part of the club. It's a club they've established, basically, and we want to be part of it. Just like a country club or any place like that, you have to pay to be part of that to use it. And that's the only analogy I can use, maybe
Okay.
I understand that. My question is not how they ever got a hold of it to do that. But it is what it is, and yeah, I understand, you gotta pay these fights.
Okay, gentleman here in the blue shirt, and then gentleman behind him.
Thanks, Matt Martin, 5 Parsonage Lane. I have a question, I guess, first question, the difference is $8 million, but all the math was done on 10 million. Is that for contingency and overages potentially? Or is that debt service?
Rounding. To speak to the 10 million, that's a rounding of this number right here, $9.945 million. That's purely where that came from, just to get it to a number that we could manage in terms of what it would be on the tax rate.
So, thank you. So for the chart with all the incremental dollars, we can all expect to spend $189. That's to cover the fixed charges?
You talk about this chart?
Correct.
So if you look at this here, you have, so on the left-hand side, you have the two options. One option is spreading it by account. The second option, option 2, is putting it into the rate and basing it on consumption. And again, if you go across here, on the left-hand side, the capital portion is that $10 million right here. The buy-in is the $7.68 million that we talked about to buy into the MWRA, and that would be it if combined and all put into the water rate.
Correct, so this is all fixed cost. My question is the NWRA's water any cheaper than what we have now, such that there could be potential savings if we move this route?
In terms of the, and I could ask Mark to speak to the detail, but in terms of the purchase of water, there is a differential between the MWRA and the rate we're presently paying by the town of Andover. Mark, if you could speak to the detail on that.
Just a short answer, for FY15, the difference in rates between Andover and MWRA is about 25% less per unit volume. So per million gallons, MWRA is about 25% less than the town of Andover.
And that's my question. You guys should highlight that if the fixed cost is substantial, but if there's a savings incorporated.
There is one caveat, okay? The water we produce from our wells is less than what we pay from Andover. So you have to combine the two. And at that point, the MWRA water rate may be equal to or a little more than, but it's a short-term situation.
So that's my question.
Yes.
Should we, this is my fixed cost going up, should I expect my variable costs to go up or down?
Long-term
Do you know?
I would say that if you project out, right, and get past the 25-year buyback or the fee for joining the MWRA, you'll see a drop in your water rate. And the growth in the water rate over this period of time, based on what MWRA is projected as their annual increase in water versus the contract we have with Andover, which is only, for another few years, is at 5% per year. And I think the MWRA, Michael, I think you had a number for MWRA projected increase, or maybe missed?
The average is about 4% per year.
Okay, the average for MWRA has been 4%.
Increase per year?
Increase.
Yes.
In our
So
current,
we pay them $7.5 million as a fixed fee, but then we'll also be paying for our water.
Correct.
And that
Yes.
rate is likely to rise at 4%, and we don't know if it's higher or lower than what we're paying now.
no,
Right at the
so
moment, you're
round numbers, so the the Andover rate is about 25% higher than the MWRA rate, as Mark just identified. The rate of escalation on our current intermunicipal agreement is 5% per year. The rate of escalation provided to us by the MWRA as recently as today, 4% per year. So lower by 25%, lower rate of escalation.
That's the raw water rate, not the
Purchasing more water.
buy-in.
And just to reiterate, I think it should be charged based on usage. I think that's the fairest route. I have 3 girls, and
Okay. All right, we got that. Gentleman in the back.
Oh, sorry, Nick Coelho, 9 Hayward Street, just touch on, I think you mentioned them up point, so talk about the Andover rate is 25% less than you mentioned, but we have water for ourselves, so those combined would be slightly less than MWRA, right?
I think, could you get to a microphone so we can hear you better? That's better.
I thought I heard just a little while ago that the Andover rate is significantly higher than MWRA grid.
25%, yes.
And then, but would you include the Andover water plus our own water, the cost of that combined would be slightly less than MWRA water?
Correct.
Correct?
I think close. I don't have, mathematically have it available, but
I just wanted to.
based on the fact that we're drawing about 700, 0.7% of our million gallons, and the rest is coming from Andover.
Gentleman over on the right, Bobby, in front.
Sir?
Mark Penny, 12
Actually, it's less. That's-
Yes.
The gentleman from Reading has stated like, hey, don't give up your rights to your existing one. And then you mentioned something about maintaining your facilities.
No, he said they shut
Shut it
down
down.
their treatment plant, I believe. Let him answer the question. Thank you, Bob.
He's not putting any money into it. No.
Thank you. Our issue was a lot more complicated than yours, believe it or not. We went in partially because we were only drawing from the river. We didn't have an Andover. They were our Andover. We went to them because we needed more water than the river could give. After doing that for a few years, we went fully to them. But one of the state agencies involved has insisted that we keep a redundant supply of water, which right now is the Ipswich River, because there's only one connection to Reading. So as a result, we have to maintain our well field. Our hope is, when we get another source, through MWRA, a second and maybe a third through Andover, we can fully abandon our wells, or at least have that local option. Where you have Andover as a backup, I don't think they're going to, I can't speak for the DEP, but I can't imagine why they would require you to maintain your well field. However, your rights are the important part, because you can always build something again.
Sir? Name and address?
Joyce Luongo, 18 Ridgeway Road. A couple of questions. If, just based upon some prior comments, not that I support it, I'm not supportive of it, if you only do a partial value, it seems like we'd still have to pay the $300,000 a year anyways. I mean, that's a fixed price, whether it's a partial or full, or that would be modified.
It is
Would be
modified.
less, okay. The other question I had was, when we're actually buying our water, are we buying it from the MWRA or are we buying it from Reading? And where is it going to be metered? Is it going to be metered?
It is going to be metered at, basically at our pumping station, right at the border. And my understanding is that there probably will be 2 meters, one for North Reading and one for the MWRA. That may change as we discuss those things. And we will be billed by the MWRA. And my understanding is, at least in earlier discussions, they would measure the Reading water coming into Reading. They'd measure the water going into North Reading. They'd subtract it to provide Reading their actual bill, and we would get billed by the MWRA for the water that we brought into our system.
I guess my concern was, and it does happen, is when a water line breaks, I mean, we lose huge amounts of water. And since we're going to be dependent upon Reading to bring the water into North Reading, if Reading's infrastructure needs to be fixed in order to supply that, how does that cost get petitioned between the two towns? Is that could be quite expensive.
Good luck.
This is more fun than our town meeting that just concluded. To answer your question, there's a wheeling, what's called a wheeling charge, and it can take different forms, but effectively it's North Reading paying Reading some amount by some calculation for the wear and tear in our system of having this additional water go through it. Once that charge is determined and assessed, The responsibility of maintaining our system is fully on us, fully. Now, if there's some catastrophic emergency, perhaps we get together and we talk. But by having the meters the way they are, if there's leakage in the Reading system, we pay for it. If there's leakage in the North Reading system, you pay for it. But if there's just routine wear and tear on the infrastructure in Reading, because, you know, we might argue it's because of North Reading, that's our hard luck. You've already paid us for that wear and tear.
Thank you. Mrs. Martin, and then Mrs. Martin.
I'll just go over
Karen
that.
Martin, 25 Glendower Road. Is there a set rate for those wheeling charges that Reading could charge North Reading?
We are currently discussing an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Reading, and of course that piece will be part of it. So these discussions have been going on for several months. There is a draft now of an intermunicipal agreement that the town of Reading is reviewing. So we will negotiate that fee. And when we get to that point, we can't say what it's going to be at this point, but I believe based on our relationship with the town of Reading, that they have been extremely fair and proactive in working with us to come up with, as the town manager just said, what they want to do is cover their maintenance costs associated with wear and tear on their system of providing water to come through the town of Reading into North Reading.
So you don't expect any significant impact in the rates?
There will be an impact in the rate, but I don't think it will be as significant of anything that we discussed tonight. Do you have any examples of shuttling fees that other communities may be paying?
We must charge them something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Lexington and Lexington, the Lexington deal? There's a wheeling charge.
I don't know what the number was.
There are different models.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways to do it.
Different models, some of the cost of pumping.
Mm-hmm.
Lexington to Bedford is an example.
That's actually one we're looking most closely at, actually, is that one. Yeah.
That both parties are very satisfied with it, it's worked very well.
Yep.
I was just saying that the Lexington Wheels Water to Bedford, that's an arrangement that has been very successful for many, many years. And I believe I've heard this is the model the way to look.
That's the one we've been looking most closely at. Yeah. There it is.
And again, I think both parties are very satisfied with the arrangement.
Yep.
And it's worked well.
So we don't have an exact answer at this point, but we are working on the issue. Okay, I think the gentleman here in the blue shirt had his hand up last. Okay?
As far as the rates go, you said yearly by MWRA, is it per town, or is it a big, small town, city, together? You guys do your increases?
The MWRA puts the current expense budget together. It is reviewed by the communities through the MWRA advisory board.
Right.
It goes to the board of directors for final approval. And we've been working very hard to try to smooth over rate increases, and that's why your town administrator tonight mentioned that there is a goal and a plan in place that no wholesale water increases will be greater than 4% as you move forward. But as an annual review of the budget, it goes through different analysis by different agencies, more specifically the communities themselves through the advisory board, and the entire budget of the board of directors, which is made up of
Vary the rates.
at least 6 member communities.
And dump money
So
in the
that
reserves.
there's a lot of
Right.
and it's a very transparent
All right,
process.
so when you say at this point in time, it's 4-point-something% annually for guarantees at X amount of years at 4%, or every year we're crossing our fingers?
Well, again, there could be hiccups. I mean, I'm not going to, but the goal anyway, the average is going to be 4%, and everyone pays the same rate. There's not different rates. Reading would pay the same as North Reading, would pay the same as Somerville where I live, and our needed is 5 million gallons.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Back to the mechanical. We're gonna have 2 pipes coming in that Reading, Haverhill and Mill.
It's one, so one MWRA connection in the approximate area of Mill Street, not 2, 1.
So I thought somebody said earlier we had a connection on Haverhill, no?
There was a question that was made, that came up from the audience that made reference to it, and that may have been a misunderstanding as to the map. There's one connection.
One
That's
connection,
correct.
yes.
That's correct.
2 meters.
That pipe's gonna come down Mill Street from 28, I imagine?
From Reading down Mill Street, that's correct. And what size pipe is it, Paul? It's a 12-inch pipe.
Mr. Mills?
Is there a minimum and maximum amount that we have to use?
No.
No?
More the better.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay. Who else had a hand up?
Yeah, Mark Henning.
Yes, Mark.
But getting back just briefly to.
Can you just switch the mic on? Oh, it won't work? Okay. There's one on the other side of you.
No, it's a row in front of it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So brief. So I wasn't here the last meeting, but, so getting back to the sewage question. If you go with the partial sewage on Concord Street through 28, does North Reading maintain sole autonomy over that as far as the MWRA in the future, like, force North Reading to expand the sewage into other parts of town?
I don't believe they'd have a right to do so, and Fred may be able to answer the question of what's been done.
I'll give you a simple answer. It's not going to happen. I think in all the presentations that came forward tonight, it was very clear that if MWRA has any play in any of this, it would be just for that Concord Street portion. The MWRA has a significant capacity at Deer Island. There is not enough capacity from North Reading to get it to Deer Island. So there's, because of all the other communities from North Reading before you get to Deer Island, it overflows and all those different concerns. You basically put it in the column that it won't happen,
Yeah.
can't happen.
Yep. Okay.
That's coming from something
Yep. Again, I'm just going to repeat. On the sewer, the Board of Selectmen's target for sewer is related to economic development. And any other area, the DEP comes down and says, look, you got 5 years to straighten out this or that. And we don't know of any real pressure in that area at this point. I said the most sensitive area is the area around Martin's Pond, right? In the original wastewater plan that goes back 6 or 7 years ago, basically was Concord Street, Route 28, the center of town, town buildings, and Martin's Pond. And the center of town buildings we have a solution for. And keep in mind that the Ipswich watershed people and the DEP want us to put water back in the ground. So by bringing in MWRA water, we're actually putting more water in the ground than we are currently. Because we're taking it out and putting it back. We'll be adding additional water when we go to 100% MWRA. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Bob Atkinson, again,
Yes.
8 Elm Street. Will this presentation be available as PowerPoint slides on the town website for download or viewing? And will this, the recorded version of this be available in case, like, my mom wants to look at it?
Yes.
Does she have any interest?
The answer is yes, yes. The NORCAM cable people, I believe, put these kinds of meetings on YouTube. And I think all you have to do is Google, you'll find it.
We also have we have a link on our website.
That's true, right. Thank you, Michael.
We'll put this online.
This will be loaded up there as well.
Great, thank you.
I want to remind, first of all, I want to thank everybody for attending. And second, I want to remind everybody that there are several articles at our June town meeting, June 6th, regarding this. Some of it is related to financing some engineering work that needs to be done, so that next June town meeting, we'll be asking for the capital money for the pumping system and the work that has to be done in the town of Reading that we have to pay for. We're looking for a good positive turnout, and I want to remind everybody that it's very important to the town and its future, and would hope that we have your support. We're going to take your input. We're going to try to get some more input on the financing aspects of it, and we really appreciate the feedback. And at this point, if no one else has any new questions,
The decision can be made on option 1, 2, or the mill rate. You're going to pay for it. Who makes it?
we are going to have a discussion on this coming year's water rates, and whether or not we make a decision at that point, because we're funding from existing funds the engineering work on this. So I would guess that the decision will be made a year from now, sometime in that time frame. And there'll be other opportunities for input before we make a final decision.
And just to speak to that, to be clear again, 2 warrant articles on the town meeting as proposed. One is with regard to the design and engineering work that needs to be done associated with this connection. The second is with regard to the ability to petition the legislature, become a customer of the and a member of the MWRA as well. So those are 2 articles that are on there. And I would just note, again, as I referenced earlier, the financing is all currently projected in the water rates. So that would be in this option 2 here, based on consumption. And that's the kind of, for lack of a better term, the default of how the cost would be raised. Any decision to make a change to that would happen down the road.
Thank you. At this point, we have one more question.
Could we request like a copy of the transcript of the DEP, the Ipswich River Basin Authority, saying that North Reading is not adequate for wells? Can we have that in writing, and that way they feel real good about this?
Isn't that part of the DEIR?
Yeah, that exists.
Paul?
If you can rephrase the question maybe after, so I can understand the context.
Sir, to speak to it, though, we do have ongoing discussions, as was mentioned by the consultant, with the regulatory agencies that are involved, so we could certainly bring that question to them.
Yes, ma'am.
When can we expect to have further discussion on sewerage? I think it's been a while. 3 years. If memory serves me correctly, I think it's been a couple of years.
I think it's an important... Michael, you want to speak to it since you've been working on economic development?
In regards to the storage in the commercial districts, we talk about it every day in our economic development committee. As you can see, the study we did, which we should probably put that on the website too, to show the entire study so you can see it. It's very expensive to implement it. And right now, we have to pick our priorities. Mr. Messeri started off the meeting tonight. He talked about our strategic plan and what our #1 priority is, and it's water right now. We have to focus on that. We're doing on the economic development side, we're looking at Concord Street and Route 28. And we can't neglect Martin's Pond as we look at a solution. Right now, there's no way we can afford to take on that level of infrastructure. In addition to the schools that we've just taken on, and now this water project, I think we have to sort of balance our stretch. With the economic development stuff we have in mind right now, we're trying to encourage a lot of businesses to look at options for these small package plants as solutions for the commercial areas. And as we start to develop those commercial areas, it will give us some new growth, a new revenue, and hopefully some additional seed money now to reinvest in wastewater solution that is beneficial to the town. That's the best I can tell you right now, because it is such an expensive. Not anytime. I'm going to be very honest with you, but just because we don't have it doesn't mean we can't grow this town. There are some very good opportunities out there. And with the technology, if you look at our school plant that we just built, they're doing a lot of that now at a smaller scale. It's very beneficial to multiple properties. And economic development, we're trying to learn more about it, trying to get out to the business community and to try to encourage them to consider those types of options so we can redevelop our business areas. But I have a lot of faith in the opportunities that we have down on Concord Street with MWRA, but we have to get this project behind us. The town can't afford us to focus on a project of that size and this at the same time. The people feeling the pinch, we know it, but we also know that economic growth is really the only solution to help sustain our tax rates of the future. And that's what we're trying to do.
Mr. O'Leary.
Yeah, and just in relation to specific projects in sewerage, again, it was mentioned, the Concord Street potentially tying into the MWRA will be in the near future. And additionally, at town meeting, again, there's another warrant article to appropriate money for an additional study, as was mentioned earlier, of the septic systems of the existing town facilities in the center of town to tie into the wastewater treatment plant that we just built for the high school. Other than that, the rest of it's down the road, because again, as pointed out, economically, it's a lot of money and a huge investment. And to us, getting the water here is the first key component that needs to be addressed, because we can't meet our demands at this particular point in time.
Okay, if there's any questions that at least haven't been asked before, otherwise I'm going to adjourn the meeting. And thank everybody for coming, and hope to see you at town meeting. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging around.